Okay, good evening, Democrats.
Good evening, John.
Democrats.
Good evening, Democrats, rather.
Okay, I'm still hearing some side conversations. Let's try again. Everybody, good evening, Democrats.
Good evening, Democrats.
Okay, everybody, and my name is John Katz. I'm the president of the Santa Monica Democratic Club. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. And since our last meeting, we had the March primary, and it was a very good result for the Santa Monica Democratic Club. Almost all of our candidates advanced or won outright in their races. So just to run through all of our endorsements and how it all went. First of all, President Biden, you may have heard of him. He won the primary with 89%. Yeah, Isabel said that's the result in November too. So let's hope. Our candidate for Senate, Adam Schiff, advanced to the top two. And the good news for him is he's running against Steve Garvey, Republican. So I think it's pretty likely that we'll have Senator Schiff in Congress in a few months. Ted Lieu and Rick Chavez-Zabur, no surprise that they advanced, but their opponents are almost split between two no-name Republicans each, so they should be in good shape. Measure 1, California Measure 1, we endorsed it, and it narrowly won 50.1 to 49.9%, and they're saying that 0.2% difference was because of the Santa Monica Democratic Club endorsement. Our district attorney, George Gascon, advanced to the runoff along with the Republican candidate, Nathan Hochman. He ran as a Republican in 2022 for attorney general. So, he changed his registration to become a declined to state, of course, because he wants to win in LA, but we know that he's a Republican. So, for Gascon fans, this is great news because it's the best possible opponent, an actual Republican in the flesh. For LA County Committee, 6 of our 7 endorsed candidates won a seat. There's no general election for them. They'll be on the county committee for the next 4 years. Our very own Susan Shu, Danielle Wilson, Michael Soloff, who's here tonight, Isabel Story, who's right there, Dina Igglesrud, and Eddie Mendoza all won their seat. Unfortunately, the 7th candidate, Eric Matos, fell a bit short, but I did get news that he was appointed as Susan's alternate, so he'll be able to serve as an alternate in LACDP anyway. Every judicial candidate we endorsed either won outright or advanced to the top 2. So that's George Turner, Erica Wiley, Sharon Ransom, Kimberly Rapeka, Leslie Gutierrez, and Georgia Huerta. We had no consensus on Office 137, which is the one race that we'll be considering again for the general election between Tracy Blunt and Luz Herrera. We'll invite them back to the club to reconsider that race. So, with due respect to Mr. Matos, other than Eric, we swept. All of our endorsements went through, so pretty good primary night. Speaking of election results, last night there was a special election in Huntsville, Alabama, for a state representative seat that the Republican won in 2022 by 8%. In the special election last night, the Democrats put forward a pro-choice woman named Marilyn Lands, whose entire campaign was focused on the Alabama Supreme Court decision that threatened to criminalize in vitro fertilization. The Republican candidate ran away from that issue and tried talking about anything else other than IVF. And the final results came in, and Marilyn Lands won by 14 points, total blowout. Now, the analysis shows that special elections are highly predictive to the upcoming general election. Better indicator than the polls, better indicator than approval ratings, fundraising. So let's hope that that remains true. We've seen other special elections in Congress, George Santos's seat, where Democrats were able to flip Republican seats. So hopefully that bodes well for the House, for the Senate, and for the presidency as well. Okay, so change of plans from what was announced here a month ago. We had discussed Senator Ben Allen coming. He's now going to come next month, April 24th. That's our next meeting. He'll be right here. Tonight, we have a great program that couldn't be more timely. Last week, Santa Monica City Council voted unanimously to move forward to look at how to right our city's past wrongs regarding the Ebony Beach Club. So if you don't know what that means, you will by the end of this meeting. We're going to be talking about reparations. What does that mean? How has it worked in the past? And what might it look like for Santa Monica and for Silas White's family? But first, we have a few club votes to take. So first up, are you ready this time? Okay, so first up, we have our bylaws committee chair, Mike Soloff, to discuss an amendment to our bylaws. Here he comes now.
Good evening, everybody. Hopefully you've all had a chance to see the bylaws change. There are two things. One, it's very simple. We say that we can only endorse Democrats. And we just clarified that that also means that when we hold candidate forums, et cetera, for those endorsements, only Democrats can participate. The other was that we've created now a clear procedure for how resolutions will be handled in the club. You may remember we had a resolution recently regarding air quality at the schools. And we realized that our bylaws didn't really have a clear set of procedures about that. So this is what the executive committee has recommended be added to the bylaws. Make clear that the resolutions first have to come to the executive committee. The executive committee has three options with that. They can decide to send it to a vote of the membership, either with a recommendation or without a recommendation about it. Secondly, they can say, you know what, there needs to be more study of this issue before it goes to the membership, and send it either to one of our existing committees or create a special ad hoc committee so that we have people who really know about the issue. And then that would come back to the board. Or the executive board could decide that this particular issue is really not one that they believe should be handled by the Santa Monica Democratic Club. And because we're a very little d Democratic organization, as well as a big D Democratic organization, we wanted to make sure that even if that was the decision of the executive board, that there would still be an option to bring that to a vote of the membership. So if the proponent, after learning that the executive board said they didn't believe that should go to the membership, if they can get 7 members in good standing in the club to sign and say, nevertheless, they want it to go to the membership, that will bring it to the membership for a vote, regardless of what the board said. And then the other point we made is how it would work once it comes to a vote. You need, like everything else, you'd need 55%. Are you looking for where this is, or it seems to be moving around? Got it. Okay, you have to keep going. It's on page 7. At the bottom is where this is, but then carrying over to 8. But anyway, so you need a 55% vote. There'll only be one round. It's not like candidates where something could drop out. And people will have the option, obviously, of voting for taking no position, which would be consistent with the board's view that something might not be something that the membership should take a position on. That could either be because the board recommended that, or because the membership, overruling the board, thought that that's a better place to go. So that's what we've done, is create a clear procedure to handle that. I'm happy to answer any questions. And if not, I'll entertain a motion to adopt the bylaw amendments as proposed. Dan.
I move we adopt the bylaws amendments as proposed.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, I think I saw Sam Cozzolino first, so we'll do that. Okay, if you are a dues paying member of the club, please, only those folks vote. If you are such a person and you are in favor of adopting these bylaw amendments, please raise your hand. Okay. Can you, somebody count, are you counting in the room, John? Okay. And can somebody count online?
Plus 15.
8 online, apparently.
Yeah, plus 8, so.
Okay, so that's 23 in favor,
I
okay?
think I saw 9 online. Judy Abdo had her real hand up rather than her virtual hand.
Okay, 24 in favor. If you can lower all those hands online. Okay, and then are there any dues paying members who are opposed to adopting the bylaws? These bylaw amendments? Okay, seeing none, it passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Oh, yes. Anybody want to abstain? Okay, nobody wants to abstain. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Mike. So, those bylaws changes will be in effect as of the adjournment of this meeting. Next, we will go to our legislative committee. The VP of legislation is the great Isabel Story.
Too much of this job.
Hello, everybody.
Mm.
So yeah, we have quite a list of bills that our legislative committee has reviewed, recommended to the board, and then the board reviewed them and is also recommended. So these come to you recommended by the committee and by the board. There's a handout if you want to follow along on the hard copy on the table there. There are a few more. We're also going to have them as slides up there. As
Just
soon as our adept tech person gets them up there. But the other thing I can say, we have 15 bills, and in our committee, the way it works is that individual people propose these bills to the committee, and then if they are endorsed by the club, that person is then responsible for actually advocating for the bill, like writing letters, calls, following the bill all the way through the legislative process. So those people will present the bills tonight. We're also, because of the number, going to do the vote as what's called a consent calendar, which means you'll hear about all the bills and then we'll vote on them all at once. But there is a provision, if there's something that you have a question about or objection and you would like to discuss it further, you can do what is called pull the bill. And you could say, well, this particular bill I would like to pull. And then what we will do is we'll have a separate discussion about that and we'll vote on it separately. So you have an opportunity to do that if you would like. So to go on with these, there we go, our handy slide presentation. We're going to present these kind of by categories. And we know that our club is really, one of our top concerns is about affordable housing and homelessness. We know that because we've surveyed the club and just, from what people talk about. So we look closely at Assemblyman Alex Lee had a very good package of bills on housing. And we picked out 3 of the top ones that we thought were the top ones. And actually, the first one is going to be presented by Janice Schnittman. Is she in the Zoom?
I'm here. Can people hear me?
Yeah, AB 2881, the Social Housing Act. We may have to switch the view, so it will take just a moment to switch the view so we can see you, Janice. I will say as an introduction to this one that Alex Lee did have a similar bill. This sounds familiar to you about social housing last time, and it got very far, and you were nodding. What happened to that? Did the governor veto it, or? Leah's nodding, yeah. So he's trying again, and we endorsed this last time, and so we're hoping that we're going to endorse it again. Okay, Janice, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, so social housing is something like what we think of as public housing, but in the United States, public housing has always been by law only for poor people, which means it's stigmatized and underfunded and isolates people in public housing. And because we don't have a wide range of people of various walks of life, living in public housing, it doesn't have a constituency to make it decent and good. But social housing can be wonderful in the city of Vienna, which has the highest quality of life of any city in the world. I think it vies with Zurich usually for top things. I think 60 or more percent of the population lives in what's called social housing. Social housing is a form of housing that takes the profit out of housing and just provides it at the cost that it requires to provide it. And it becomes, because people of all income levels are eligible for social housing, the people who have greater means pay more, and that subsidizes the housing for less people. So everybody lives in the same housing. You get the integration of communities, you get high quality housing that everyone feels great about living in. People want to live in private housing, they can, but most people where it's offered in Vienna are very happy to be in social housing. It's such a good idea that the reaction.
1 minute, can you
Oh.
wrap it up, please?
Okay, so it's housing that part of what makes it so difficult to develop affordable housing the way we do it, with these very complicated different funding sources that take time to get, and the time is the clock is ticking away. With social housing, the money becomes available, and then as people are paying into it by rent, or there are limited equity ownership models, the money becomes available to develop new housing, and it becomes revenue neutral. And I hope that made sense in 1 minute.
Okay, thanks so much, Ginny. So this is basically for California to try social housing.
To create a housing authority to actually start doing it, as it has been done in this country in Montgomery County in Maryland. It's not just a very exotic European thing, and Seattle is also getting the ball rolling on doing it as well.
Okay, thanks so much. And then for our next bill, we have, yeah.
They have headphones on now.
All right, so this bill from Alex Lee addresses California's chronic undersupply of subsidized affordable housing.
I'm done. I'm ready to go eat.
Your mic is on.
I'll mute, go ahead.
So, you know, we're having a housing crisis, and it seems like a really good idea to try different ideas. This is a zero interest construction loan with a 5-year repayment schedule. And you'd have to be a mixed income housing project to qualify for it. Just to get around the obstacles that state budget cuts and high interest rates pose to building affordable housing. I have a friend who's working with the community corporation in Culver City, and it's just gone on forever as she tries to put the different pieces of financing together. And financing becomes this huge part of the cost that could be negotiated with, whereas, you know, other construction costs that have been increasing and labor costs are less negotiable. So the loans would only go to housing that had 30% subsidized affordable, which means in the bill, 20% would go to very low income, which would be 50% below 50% of the area median, and 10% would be low income. So there would be families. You can't. Hello? Okay, sorry.
There you go. Yeah.
All right, and I'll repeat anything you need me to, but the bill requires that 30% be affordable, and that's defined as 20% very low income, which is below the 50% of the area median, and 10% low income, which is 80%, below 80% of the area median income.
Okay, thanks so much, Leah. And then I took on AB 2584. This is has to do with the corporate house ownership of homes. As we know, price of home ownership keeps going up. The interest rates are going up, and homes have become unaffordable for most Californians. I think only 15% of Californians would be able to afford a new home. But at the same time, institutional investors are buying up homes at a record rate. In 2022, they bought 1 out of 3 homes on the market. And if it continues by 2030, they're thinking they're gonna be buying 40% of the homes. And that what they do is, they turn these around and make them into high price rentals. And unfortunately, the type of homes that they buy up are the lower price, single family homes that would normally be a starter home for first time buyers. And so they're taking those off the market and raising the overall prices of homes. So what this bill does, it just limits that. It doesn't say they can't do it at all, but it puts a cap on if these corporations own 1,000 homes, they can't buy anymore. So, the idea of that is to keep so many homes out of the hands of the corporate owners and to bring down the cost of these small first-time homes. All right, now we are going to go on to the environment. And most of these have to do with utilities. I call it environment because what's going on with the utilities is a number of these bills have to do with the fact that the California Public Utilities Commission last year made a number of changes that benefit utility companies but are bad for the environment. I have to juggle so many people. Okay, because the next 2 bills I'm presenting myself. I spent so much time on the slideshow that my own things are little secrets, but I do know about all these bills. Okay. So what am I doing next? AB 1999. Okay, this one is because last year in the budget, they put a little known noticed provision that most legislators didn't notice that allowed the utilities to have an unlimited utility tax, no ceiling on it. And if this goes into effect this year, utility taxes go up $30 to $70 per residential customer. This would have the biggest impact on the lowest income people. And would be quite a burden for that if you multiply even 30 a month, but certainly 70 a month by 12 months, you're going to see it takes a big bite out of a family budget. They're thinking that it's going to have the worst impact on people in apartments, condos, and small homes who use less energy because their fee would be just as high as homes that use more energy. Also, having a high fixed cost cuts down on the benefit of reducing your consumption. So it does no good to, leave your lights off, try to conserve, have solar power, batteries, all these things. They wouldn't affect that rate because that would be a fixed rate. So when some of the legislators realized that that had gotten past them, they have got together, there are 20 co-authors on this bill. It puts a cap on that utility tax at $10, which is kind of in line with the nationwide average. If we had $30 to $70, that would be 3 to 7 times the national average. So it just brings it down to the national average, gives them, the utility companies, the money they need, but does not put an undue burden on the ratepayers. So that's 1999. Then there's 2256, low income customers. This one has to do with solar power. Last year also, it sounds like the CPUC is a big bad villain, but in a way they have been. They're putting their profits ahead of the needs of consumers and against the environmental good of the planet. So they really cut back on solar benefits, and that part of that is the net metering, the amount of money that when you have solar panels and you put energy back into the grid, you get a certain amount of money. Well, they cut that way back. But their justification was they had a study done and they used very narrow criteria for what are the benefits of solar power. So what this bill does, it says you have to take the full range of benefits of solar power into account when you set these rates. And the study that they used last time was a private company hired by them. So it makes it so that this has to be more publicly done. It has to take the full range of solar, the benefits into effect. And I have to say something that's very discouraging is because of what they did, we were doing very well in California and getting more and more rooftop solar. The solar industry has been cut by 70 to 80% this year in California due to this change. And we've had layoffs of 17,000 jobs. So this is to get, basically they've gutted rooftop solar in California. So this is to get rooftop solar going again. That's what this bill is about. Okay, then we have 2684. Leah's up here, so I guess you are doing it.
Okay, so AB 2684 from Isaac Bryan would require local jurisdictions to address extreme heat in their safety element of their general plans. You may know about the general plan. It's like the constitution of each city, and it gets redone every, by either by element every 10 years or, every 10 years you do the whole thing. Our cities, our counties, our local jurisdictions don't plan for urban heat. It just hits every year, and it's the hottest year on record every single year. Heat is one of the most underappreciated hazards of climate change. 2 years ago, the Legislative Analyst's Office warned that extreme heat will be among the deadliest and most expensive impacts of climate change. We know people are dying in the heat, and there are federal dollars available to fund hazard preparation. But our cities and counties can't access these dollars if they don't have a plan written down in their city constitution. Cities and counties need to make a plan for heat in order to be able to respond in a meaningful way when it happens. But in addition, having a disaster plan is essential because if something happens against your plan, you are eligible for FEMA dollars. And if you don't have a plan, you are not. So I hope you support this bill. Thanks.
Okay, thanks so much, Leah. So now we're going to move to our next category of bills, which is on democracy. So as we know, although our country has a great history of democracy, it's kind of under threat across the country by factions who I won't name, but you know who they are. And there have been some voter suppression laws and things in other states and voter ID laws. And so you think, well, that's not a problem in California. Well, up till now, it hasn't been. Well, we're one of 15 states that has no voter ID laws, but just a few weeks ago, City of Huntington Beach passed a charter amendment that called for voter ID at the polls, and it passed. So Senator Mint, is he a senator? Yes, Senator Min actually was quite alarmed by this. He came up with this bill right away, which was basically to ban voter ID laws in California. It's happened in one city. Now, this is just for city elections, but this is something, once it gets a toehold, it's something that we really don't want to see anywhere else. And we know that this kind of requirement just disenfranchises people, usually the elderly, women, because of they may have a name change, minorities. So many groups are disenfranchised by this kind of requirement. And in California, we already have ways of verifying ballots that have worked very well for us. We have signature verification and other things. The people who have proposed the voter ID requirement have no cases to point to of anyone committing fraud like this. So it's really just an infringement of voter rights. So this is just to protect California from this happening. Okay, the next two are very closely related bills. And I do not know if Jim is online. Jim was going to present these, but he said at the last minute he wasn't sure if he could make it. So Jim Kennedy, is he online? If he's not, we have a backup plan.
I don't see him online.
Okay. He told me he might not be able to make it. So just as a precaution, he sent me something to read. So these are two bills that are very similar, and basically what Jim has proposed is he will follow both of the bills to see if they both advance or one does or the other, but they're both to prevent people running for two offices at the same time. I guess that's the simplest way to say it. So there's Assembly Bill 1784 would prevent a person from filing nomination papers for more than one office at the same election. 1795 is similar. It allows a candidate to withdraw from one race to run for another office if the filing period for that office is extended because an incumbent doesn't run for re-election. It sounds kind of complicated, but it's actually a situation that happened. So in general, the reasoning behind this, allowing people to run for multiple offices at once defies common sense. This is Jim's words, and can confuse voters and undermine confidence in the electoral system. If a candidate wins in more than one race, the district would go without representation until a special election is held to fill the unoccupied seat. And special elections are expensive for taxpayers and to have very low voter turnout, which is not ideal for healthy democracy. As a prevention, these bills stop candidates from getting elected to two or more offices and then refusing to resign for one of their conflicting positions. Our current and most egregious example is Gloria Gray, who ran on the same ballot for Inglewood City Council and West Basin Municipal Water District. Ms. Gray refused to obey the law, and the Los Angeles DA's office has not been willing to enforce the law. So Jim says allowing the candidates to game the system for their benefit is unfair to voters and bad for democracy. So that is why he is proposing that, and we are recommending to endorse those two bills. And I think that is it. Okay, for democracy. Then we're moving on to healthcare. We have Lynn presenting the first one on that.
This is a real quick one. It's by Rick Zabur. Has to do with healthcare coverage and cost sharing. And with this law, health plans and insurers must cover services without cost sharing that are integral to providing recommended preventative care. And these services include things like anesthesia, polyp remover during colonoscopy, placement, management, and removal of long-acting reversible contraceptives, and ancillary and support services for PrEP, including HIV and other STI screening. Common sense.
Okay, and our other healthcare bill is going to be presented by Sam.
Hey, Bill,
Hold it
so,
up really close.
so I'm presenting the Jacqueline Marie Zabur Rare Disease Advisory Council. As you might know, Assemblymember Zabur's sister died of Lou Gehrig's disease a few years ago, and this would ensure for the 1 in 10 Californians who suffer with a rare disease that there is more research and more awareness on the topic. So for the next 4 years, there would be a council made up of at least 17 members so that there's more awareness and more research, not going only to the legislator, but to private entities as well. So this is really happening because on Monday, there's a referral to the health committee in the assembly, and then April 23rd it will be heard. So this is fastly approaching and very relevant. Also, with the budget deficit, it should help because it's only $875,000. So thank you so much.
Okay. Our next two bills are going to be presented by Lynn. That they don't have a particular category. They're just 5 more bills that we're presenting tonight.
Okay, this one is by Evan Lowe, and it has to do with artificial intelligence, and it proposes that all AI-generated visual media must contain a perceptible watermark disclosing to the consumer that AI was used to create it. This requirement will help stop the spread of misinformation and the dissemination of digitally manipulated media for deceptive practices. And if a visual media generated by AI is created and spread without a watermark, the Department of Technology can fine the creator up to $500. It also requires the department's standard to, at a minimum, require that this entity include digital content provenance, which means its origin, included in the watermark. And also, it provides that the AI generating entity or individual that creates a deep fake using a person's name, voice, signature, photograph, or likeness in any manner without permission from the person being depicted in the deep fake is liable for all actual damages suffered by the person or persons as a result of the unauthorized use. So that's that one. The next one is by Alex Lee, and this establishes the LGBTQ Commission in the state government. It provides for the appointment of 9 members appointed by the governor, the Speaker of the Assembly, and the Senate Committee on Rules. It establishes the goals of the commission, which would include, among other things, acting in an advisory capacity to the legislature and the governor on policy matters affecting the state's LGBTQ community and its members. And this commission will also assist in implementing those supported policies and initiatives.
Okay, thanks. All right, so the next one, SB 1297, the Speed Safety Program. Is Carl Hansen on the Zoom?
I am. Am I visible, Isabel? Thanks.
There you are, yay.
Hello. Yeah, thanks. I think anyone that was at the last meeting, we brought this up and then brought it to the legislative committee. This is Senator Allen's bill that was, I think, a response to the really tragic traffic fatality that occurred on PCH, where some students that were pedestrians were struck fatally by a vehicle there. Vehicle was speeding. Current state law doesn't allow Malibu, the PCH section in Santa Monica, other areas to install speed safety cameras. So this legislation was motivated in order to allow that to happen. And then a number of organizations, including the Santa Monica Democratic Club, Santa Monica Spoke, Streets for All, Chasm, Move LA, Santa Monica Families for Safe Streets, Santa Monica Safe Streets Alliance, and Team Marine, and I think a couple others signed on to a letter asking that locations in Santa Monica be added to that. Even if Santa Monica locations aren't added, this is still a great bill to support regardless, and would love to see it expanded, not just on the specific streets in Santa Monica that we've requested, PCH, Santa Monica, Boulevard, and Lincoln, but throughout in the future. So I think this is a really important one, and hope we'll support it.
Okay, thanks so much, Carl, for coming to us with that. And Leah has
Okay. So this one is Family Preservation Services Standards by Isaac Bryan. This is also in response to a really tragic situation with Noah Quarto, where some families who had been in the system had been taking some very low quality classes with some very tragic consequences. And I took this bill on as a child psychologist because I was rather horrified at the descriptions of what counted as parenting classes and serious abuse cases. The bill would require that any parenting classes ordered by judges in child welfare cases be evidence-based, culturally competent, and provided by qualified professionals. Right? The bill would also establish a tracking system to measure the outcome of parenting class services. Like, is this actually working? This legislation is intended to address the problems identified in an investigative report from the Los Angeles Times, which documented how court-ordered classes have been factors in cases in which children were returned to the custody of their guardians and later tortured and murdered. The Times interviewed more than 20 child welfare experts, including social workers, attorneys, retired judges, parents, and providers. It concluded that the lack of scrutiny of these classes can put some of California's most vulnerable children, those whose parents are fighting for custody while under investigation by protective services, at risk of more abuse. If you wanted to look into it more, there are two Los Angeles Times article by Mackenzie Mays, one on January 4th and one on February 22nd. And hopefully the link to that is on the Zoom chat. And I think that concludes the legislative.
Yeah, so as you can see, we've been quite busy the last few weeks. The deadline for all these bills to be presented in the legislature was February 15th. So we had, quite a volume of bills to kind of sift through and find out the ones that stood out the most to us. So as I said before, we're intending to vote on this as a consent calendar, but first I will give you a chance. If you would like to pull a bill and have a separate discussion about it, now is your chance to let me know about that. Yes. Okay. So I think we'll vote. Oh, yes. Okay. Can someone write that down? Because I didn't bring a pen or anything.
Isabel, Kevin also has his hand up.
Okay. Someone needs to kind of.
Yeah, thank you, Patricia. I hope you all can hear me.
Can you write down which ones are being pulled? Please.
I don't think Isabel's attention has been gotten yet. Natalia, are you in the room?
Yeah,
Yeah.
she's working on it right now.
Okay,
I
thanks.
have a question I would like to ask about two of the utility bills, AB 1999.
Kevin,
and
1
AB
second, because we're writing stuff down here and then we're gonna go to you for your question.
AI bill.
Okay, that's 3050.
Yeah, 3050. Okay, Ellis, you want to pull
2584.
25? Which one is that?
Corporate ownership.
Corporate ownership? Okay, and then online we had Kevin wanted to pull something.
Well, I have a question about AB 1999 and AB 2256.
Okay, let's pull them so that you can ask the question.
We'll pull them so you can ask the question. 1990 and 2256. Okay, so what will we do first?
So first we'll do the consent
Vote the
vote for the
consent.
rest, the balance of the bills.
Okay, so first we'll vote on what, yes?
Yeah, Luis.
AB 3145.
Okay, 30, 31.
Reposition camera here.
I've got AB 3050 was pulled, AB 2584 was pulled, AB 1999 and AB 2256 were pulled, as well as AB 3145. Am I missing any?
That's it. Okay. All right, so first we'll vote on the rest and then we'll address those. So.
Okay, so
should I
let's
do the
vote
vote?
on the,
Yeah. Okay.
we'll do it together.
John, can I make a suggestion that if we have guests who are waiting to talk on topic, that we vote on the consent calendar now, but the items that were pulled that we talk about after our guests and the program?
Thanks,
Okay,
Patricia.
we'll
We'll
do
do that. We'll do that.
Okay.
Everyone in the room is.
Everyone, people are waiting for the rest of the program. Okay, so we'll do that. So we'll vote on the bills other than the ones that are pulled. So everyone who is in favor of the rest of the consent calendar, please raise your hand.
Twenty-one in person.
Sorry, I've got 12 hands up that are on there, that aren't physical hands raised. So if anybody else has.
Patricia, was there anybody raising their hand that it's not a Zoom hand?
Sonia and Bruce Sultan both have their hands up.
We have, what is it, 12 in person plus 2 more.
Yeah, so So 12 in person and then 14 on
21 in person
21 and 14.
and then plus 14, so it comes out to 35. Okay, everybody can put your hands down.
Okay, thanks so much. And then after the reparations
Well, let's
program, we'll
Take-
revisit.
Is there any no votes on the consent?
Oh, sorry.
Assuming Patricia and Carl meant to have their hands down. Okay, any extensions? Okay, great, so thanks. Thank you to the Legislative Committee and to be continued later in the evening. And now we'll go to the main event. As I mentioned earlier, last week, the Santa Monica City Council voted unanimously to send a request back to the city staff to come back in 90 days with a proposal on how to handle the Ebony Beach Club situation. I see one of our council members is here tonight who was responsible for bringing that item forward. So thank you, Councilmember Terosis, and we'll be hearing from her later this evening. But it certainly raises, some larger issues, and we wanted to take a moment because the club really hasn't had the chance to weigh in an in-depth way about reparations and understanding really what that means. It certainly means a lot of different things to different people. So we wanted to take this opportunity to really take a look at what it means to some of the affected individuals, some of the people who've been working on it for many years. And, some of the meetings that we have here, we're advocating for a particular position. We're trying to say, we want you to support single payer. We want you to support, environmental legislation. We just heard about some of the legislative bills that we're working on. In this case, I mean, at least my perspective is this is really a listening session. I certainly support, making right some of the past wrongs from the city, but I don't know how to prescribe how we do that. I don't think anybody on the city council who voted yes has a particular outcome that they know they want to see. We're waiting to see what the staff comes back with. And so that's why we're here tonight, to learn about what this means and how we can proceed as a city. And so we're going to get some context about the past history of reparations, some recent examples here in Southern California, some bills that are in the state legislature right now, and finally we'll come to the specific issue of the Ebony Beach Club. So first up, we're going to hear from Dr. Cheryl Grills. She's a clinical psychologist who served on the Loyola Marymount University faculty for 36 years. In addition to a long resume of service in many capacities, she served on the California Reparations Task Force appointed by Governor Newsom, and is also a commissioner on the National African American Reparations Commission. So please welcome Dr. Grills. Yeah, so thanks so much for joining us, and why don't you start with your remarks, and we'll take it from there.
Good evening, everyone. Oh, no. I'm a college professor. We're gonna do better than that, right? It's late, I understand, but good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Thank you. That's the energy.
Dr. Grills.
Conversation. So I scripted myself so that I would stay on task because I am a professor and I could keep you here till midnight talking about the history of reparations. I won't do that. But let me start with 3 quotes that kind of sum up the issues for me. All right, first, from Zora Neale Hurston. She said, "The present was an egg laid by the past that had the future inside its shell." In other words, our past is our present, and we need to understand that. Secondly, Malcolm X said, "If you stick a knife in my back 9 inches and pull it out 6 inches, there's no progress. If you pull it out all the way, that's not progress. The progress is healing the wound that the blow made." And then the third quote is also again from Zora Neale Hurston, and she said, "There is no greater agony than having an untold story buried deep within. And that's the experience of people of African ancestry in this country in terms of how we've been treated and how we remain unseen. So let me start with a little bit of a teaser, okay? So I'm gonna take you to school. Let's talk reparations and how little we as American citizens know about our history, let alone reparations. And in fact, I would say we need to ask for a tax refund on the quality of education we've received in this country, especially when it relates to history. So who knows the origins of Christopher Columbus Day? Proving my point about the quality of our education. All right. On that day, Christopher Columbus Day, we celebrate all Italian Americans. Why? Because in 1891, 11 Italian Americans were murdered in one of the largest mass lynchings in our nation's history. In the wake of this horrific attack, President Benjamin Harrison established Columbus Day in 1892 for a number of political reasons, not just because it was the right thing to do. And what did he do in addition to establishing the day? He gave reparations. He gave the families of those lynched $25,000 each, which today would be around $125,000 each. Now, contrast that. Based on a new report, there were 6,500 documented lynchings of African Americans between 1877 and 1950. How many received reparations? This is our untold story. This is the agony that lies deep within. So what are reparations? It's responses, programmatic, financial, and healing that are justified on the basis of past harm, the legacy of those harms, and continued current harms. Reparations are designed to assess and correct the harms and improve the lives of the victims into the future. It's a definition that makes room for a diverse set of responses. And that includes a process that you have to reverse the harmful racial narratives that can be achieved in part by truth-telling policies and structures established to create and perpetuate exploitation and racial hierarchies. So when we look at reparations, particularly in the California Reparations Task Force, we were by law to align what we came up with the UN standards for reparations, of which there are 5. So those include satisfaction. There needs to be acknowledgement that there was a harm and say, I'm sorry, right? And then do some public education and memorials around that. Secondly, there needs to be compensation to a specific defined group of individuals harmed by a violation, and including descendants. Third, restitution and repatriation. Basically, you have to restore folks who are harmed to the position they were in before the initial harm occurred. That's a little hard for African Americans because we were never in a position in this country unharmed, right? And then fourth, guarantees of non-repetition. In other words, you need to put into place systems, institutions, practices that ensure that this harm those kinds of harms can never happen again. And then finally, rehabilitation. There needs to be provision of legal, medical, psychological, and other forms of care. So the root word of reparations is repair, and it is without question that considerable damage was done and that warrants repair. And the damage was not just during the period of enslavement. And so folks who are like reparations naysayers saying, well, I never owned any slaves, I wasn't involved back then. It's irrelevant. First of all, we are a society that is bound together by a social contract that says on some level, we care about each other. And at some point, we have to think about the greater good and not just I, me. But secondly, it's not just about what happened during enslavement, it was post-enslavement harms that continue up to this day and can explain all the disparities and disproportionalities that we see in America. So reparations for me is, it involves backward and forward looking efforts. Backward meaning we're measuring the past harm and correcting for it. Forward meaning we're doing the community building strategies and programs designed to promote the welfare of an entire community. And it involves acknowledging and repairing the past harm and distributing property and material resources in a fair way. Well, that's a tall order for America. Forgive race. And it begs the question, reparations, how do we put Black people back in the position we would have been in absent enslavement, Jim Crow, systemic and structural racism? What would America look like? What advances in science and technology and education might we actually be experiencing now? But we aren't, because America intentionally stuffed that out of the reality of the experience of not only Black folk, but the country. But lastly, before I just tell you a little snippet about the history of reparations in this country, reparations is also about courage. It's about agency, as well as repair, restitution, and protection from future harm. And that's no small order. Given the current political landscape and the modern day forms of terrorism, for example, the rollbacks on voter rights, voter suppression, the ballooning of police budgets, police brutality, white nationalist threats to Black life, the use of CRT as a weapon to sanitize the country's history, there's an overwhelming need for courage, the courage to do the right thing as a country. I'm not sure, but I'm gonna do like Jesse Jackson and keep hope alive that we can do this. So just a little snippet of historical context before I turn it back over. To quote Ta-Nehisi Coates, he said, "The question is not whether we will be tied to the somethings of our past, but whether we are courageous enough to be tied to the whole of them." The whole of them is that reparations has been on the Black agenda since enslavement, to no end, since enslavement, right? So the demand it's not new, it's not something from the 21st century. And understanding this historical trajectory is important to understanding where we are in the moment and the pressing need for real action now. In other words, we're dealing with a multi-generational assault and a multi-generational struggle for repair. So if we seem a little frustrated and short on patience, it's been 400 years in the making, okay? So the earliest recorded demand for reparations for enslavement in what is now the US was the 1783 petition by an African-American woman named Belinda Sutton Royal, who sought a pension from the Massachusetts legislature after her former enslaver fled to England and his property was confiscated by the state. Dozens of formerly enslaved people did the same as she did, seeking payment from state legislatures and courts during the first decades of this republic. And reparations claims have played a role in Black political thought ever since. Action by the federal government has been, to be frank, shameful. And it flies in the face of all of these so-called American ideals of equality, rights, liberty, opportunity, and even democracy. And I know I'm in the presence of the Democratic Club, but I'm about to say America has yet to be a democracy. If you don't include all of the members of the society, then it's a sham to call this a democracy. So, but then of course, there was the promise of the 40 acres and the proverbial mule. There really wasn't 40 acres and the mules, just the 40 acres under General Sherman's Special Field Order number 15. But that came to an end when President Johnson returned the 400,000 acres of confiscated lands along the southeastern coast to to its Confederate owners. In 1989, we see the first mass-based reparations movement led by, oh, by the way, reparations were paid back then. I almost forgot to say this. It was paid to the slave owners. Yeah, demand a refund on that education. Okay. So in 1989, we see the first mass-based reparations movement led by Calvin House and Reverend Isaiah Dickerson, called the National Ex-Slave Mutual Relief Bounty and Pension Movement. With a coalition of over 300,000 dues-paying members, they sought compensation for formerly enslaved and their heirs. What was the federal government response to that effort? They imprisoned Calvin House on some jacked up bogus mail fraud charges in 1917. The only example of federal payments for enslavement is the roughly $23 million that enslavers in the District of Columbia received through the 1862 Compensated Emancipation Act. During the post-World War II era, you had another major figure, Queen Mother Audley Moore, who inspired the pursuit of reparations. Among the groups that were influenced by Queen Mother Moore and her vision were the Black Panther Party, which linked the broken promise of the 40 acres and a mule to demands for land, bread, housing, education, clothing, justice, and peace. Other organizations, the Nation of Islam, the Republic of New Africa, the League of Revolutionary Black Workers, all heeded the call to go for reparations. Then we fast forward to Dr. King. Yes, the cherry-picked Dr. King, because you know we only get what America wants us to think Dr. King said and believed in and promoted. He said in Why We Can't Wait, which appeared shortly after his I Have a Dream speech, that he said, and he makes the case that compensation for enslavement is an essential part of realizing a democratic future. How many of you knew that? Two hands, okay. So he said, few people consider the fact that in addition to being enslaved for 2 centuries, the Negro during all those years was robbed of the wages of his toil. No amount of gold could provide an adequate compensation for the exploitation and humiliation of the Negro down through the centuries. Not all the wealth in this affluent society could pay the bill, yet a price can be placed on unpaid wages. The payment should be in the form of a massive program of special compensatory measures, which could be regarded as a settlement in accordance with the accepted practice of common law. Who would have thought Dr. King said something like that? So he developed his ideas further in subsequent speeches and in his book, Where Do We Go From Here? You also had folks like Malcolm X, who talked about reparations, as did the Malcolm X grassroots movement, the National Conference of Black Lawyers, and COBRA, who really accelerated in 1987 the whole reparations movement back to a massive nationwide process. Fast forward, as I wrap this up, enter Congressman John Conyers, who was encouraged by the Civil Liberties Act of 1988, which granted reparations to Japanese Americans, and in response to a relentless constituent who sat in a room just like this. His name was Reparations Ray Jenkins. And he was relentless in his pursuit of Conyers in taking up the baton of reparations. And in 1989, Congressman Conyers introduced a reparations bill, a congressional bill known as HR 40. And this bill was to establish a commission to study reparations proposals for African Americans for enslavement and its post-enslavement legacies. The bill provided the vehicle for a public policy discussion on reparations in Congress and across the nation. He introduced the bill year after year after year until he died. And then Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee took up the baton. What was the federal government's response? Zip. Congress did issue an apology for enslavement. Most people don't know about it, and it's because it has no teeth and it has no sincerity. And it has a built-in clause that said, oh, and by the way, please don't use this apology in any way, shape, or form as the basis for any kind of claims against the US government. So, yeah. Fast forward to today, we have the California Reparations Task Force, which is the first state to take up the baton under Assembly Bill 3121. Fast forward, we did, 17 listening sessions, public listening sessions with almost 900 participants, a community poll and survey across the state of over 4,000 people. I forgot how many public hearings we had. I think my brain just shut down on that. Over 100 expert witnesses, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we produced an interim report with almost 500 pages detailing 12 chapters of harm. In other words, 12 categories or areas of harm, followed by a final report of 1,100 pages. I know you've all read it cover to cover. And that detailed a series of recommendations for repair tied to those 12 categories of harm. Since we sunset, the task force has, the members of the task force have continued to do the work. And so 6 of the 9 members of the task force formed an entity called ART, the Alliance for Reparations, Reconciliation, and Truth. And this has a powerhouse of community-based organizations involved, a steering committee of organizations and allies across racial, religious, and other demographics statewide, and a growing advisory body to try to support the efforts of the legislative process to make real some of those recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Grills. I mean, that's really amazing to condense all of that information into such a short and informative presentation. So I'm sure everyone has some questions, and hopefully we'll have the chance to address those a little bit later in the program. But I want to go to our next speaker because Dr. Grills actually set up when she was discussing the California task force, what's going on in our state, and we have the California Legislative Black Caucus is currently working on a series of, I believe, 14 bills. Is that right? So we're going to hear about those tonight from Assembly Member Reggie Jones Sawyer, who served the 59th and now the 57th Assembly District since 2012. And he's been a progressive leader in the Assembly ever since then. He's the chair of the Public Safety Committee and the chair of the Select Committee on the Status of Boys and Men of Color. He's the former chair of the Legislative Black Caucus, which of course he's still a member. And it's in that context that he joins us this evening. So please welcome Assembly Member Reggie Jones Sawyer.
And I want to thank you. As of tonight, I'm the former chair of public safety. And served there for over 10 years. And it's a pleasure to be with you here tonight. One of the things that Dr. Grills and I talked about, my partner in justice is State Senator Steve Bradford. As we would tell people as we had those numerous hearings, and as people came to speak on reparations, and like I tell people, one of the things that I wish a lot of people were able to come to those hearings, because you could hear the descendants of slaves speaking through people who came and spoke about the abuses that they had experienced, and how they spoke for people who had passed, who were no longer with us. You could really hear their souls coming through the floors, coming through the walls as they spoke about how important reparations was and is, and how we had to proceed. And we would tell people that the real task of turning that, 1,400 pages, 1,200 pages, 900 pages that we did earlier 2 years ago, and then turning it into both legislative and budgetary, as and the councilwoman is shaking her head right now, to turn that into something that we can then take to a legislature that is 120 people, plus you have the governor to sign off, to be able to turn that into something that people will be able to understand, to ultimately vote on and to pass is more than a notion, as the old folks would say. And so why I'm here tonight, every single person in this country owes a debt to the African slaves who toiled day and night to build the foundation of not only this country, but of this state. Dr. Grills and I spent 2 years, too long years of our lives on the task force. And we experienced some things that I don't think many of you would really understand how important it was for us to stay focused on making sure that we're able to produce the report. But now, like I would tell people at those hearings, the bread and butter comes now, when we have to now bring and turn these into bills that will hopefully start to turn back what slavery has done to African Americans here, not only in the state, but in this country. And when I tell people, especially in this state where we have Prop 209, where we had Ward Connolly saying that we didn't need affirmative action anymore, where we had that taken away from us, to be able to tell people that this is not affirmative action. This is a lawsuit. This is a lawsuit that we're putting out there saying that we are owed this because of the atrocities that have been put on us. And when you read through all of that, it's not just the lynchings, it's not just the killings, it's not just all of that was happening here in this state. The fact that we had governors that was complicit in this, sending back runaway slaves back to their encampment, people who had enslaved them. Back then, they were sending them back to the slave states. It is really important that we learn our history, that we really understand how we were part of that. We really do need to thank the task force, because there is a mountain of evidence there that shows why we're moving forward with this. And I also want to give a shout out to the Attorney General and their staff, because they did when you look at that document, when you really look at that document, it belongs in the Library of Congress. It belongs in the Smithsonian. That's how important it is. And think about it, it's been out for a while. It's been out for years. And absolutely no one has discredited not one word in those documents. Think about that. Think about all of the MAGA, make America gullible again. Think about all of those experts that do not think the way we think, that have had an opportunity to look at that document and tear it apart, and have not, Dr. Grills, and you looked at thesis papers, probably more than you ever want to see in your life. You know how important it is to have a document that is so airtight that that's bulletproof. And so we are now taking that information, And we are trying to really make sure that our colleagues understand how important it is that we move forward. We have a duty to, at a minimum, acknowledge and accept the fact that despite joining the Union as a free state, we were capturing runaways and dragging them back to their enslavers. The problems experienced by this group of people are systemic. Why I say systemic? I mean government imposed. And I have a responsibility along with Steve Bradford and the entire California Legislative Black Caucus to reverse this river of racism that's been running through our communities for decades. Why we care? Systemic problems require systemic solutions. Just like homelessness, there's no one shot to solve for the horrors inflicted on slaves of yesterday. The California Legislative Black Caucus bill package, this bill package isn't the total solution. It is the first step. The Black Caucus selected these bills from this initial package because we know how to count votes. For most of these bills, we need 41 votes in the Assembly and 21 in the Senate. And we have to convince we're only, 10% of the legislatures, there's only 12 Black members in the Senate and the Assembly. So obviously we do not have enough votes to carry it by ourselves. And so we need to let people understand that if we get our reparations, then women, Native Americans, Latinos, API, LGBTQ, others who have been aggrieved can also get their reparations. In fact, Wendy Carrillo has put in a reparations bill for Latinos just recently, this past Friday. That's how important it is for us to go ahead and make sure that everybody understands that this is just the beginning. And like everything else, African Americans start reparations for everybody else, just like we did for affirmative action, open the door for women being able to get affirmative action. Not every bill will pass, but we can use this as a litmus test to determine the courage of our colleagues. The following are the CLBC reparation bill package, but remember, individual members will have or will introduce other reparations related bills. For instance, I will be introducing a bill similar to the federal GI Bill. Language is being worked out, but the bill is AB 3152, Jones Sawyer, creates a framework for education grants, vocational training, home ownership assistance, career training, and startup business assistance by creating a tax based on 8 products that benefited most from chattel slavery. For example, those jeans you're wearing, those jeans you wear, who's a Black man, is the ability to turn the indigo into blue was from African Americans who were able to do that. And of course, it then got processed, and now Levi Strauss is making billions of dollars from it. That is the kind of things that we're thinking about taxing, because it came from the sweat and toil of African Americans. So we're going to we started with Dr. Weber's bill, which kind of set the tone to make sure that people understood in her resolution that she did to ensure that that people understood why we're doing it. There was ACR 135 Weber and SCR 113 Smallwood Cuevas, which was a policy resolution which formally recognizes harms and atrocities committed by the state during slavery. That was passed in both houses a few weeks ago, and we'll be moving its way on. We needed to do that to set the stage. The next part will be the apology letter, which is AB 3089, my bill, Jones Sawyer. An apology statute formally declares and codifies the state of California apology for atrocities, human rights violations, and crimes against humanity on African slaves and their descendants, call for a permanent display in the state capitol, prominently displayed somewhere in the capitol, so that generations can read the apology. And I'm looking for the apology letter to be a healing letter. It's not about making people feel guilty. It's about healing us once and for all with slavery. The unjust property taking and redlining, SB 1050, Bradford, property takings, restores property taken during race-based uses of eminent domain to its original owners, or provide another effective remedy where appropriate, such as restitution or compensation. AB 2064, Jones Sawyer, establishes state grants for community-driven solutions to decrease community violence at the home, school, and neighborhood levels in targeted communities. We also have constitutional amendments. ACA 7, Jackson, amends the California Constitution to allow the state to fund programs for the purpose of increasing the life expectancy, improving educational outcomes for, or lifting out of poverty specific groups based on race, color, ethnicity, national origin, or marginalized genders, sexes, or sexual orientation. ACA 8, Wilson, amends the California Constitution to prohibit involuntary servitude for incarcerated persons. There are people in prison. They're making 25 cents an hour for corporations and others. That basically is slavery that we're doing right now. And we're saying because they're incarcerated, they're less than human and cannot earn a wage. Criminal justice, ABA 1986, Bryan, empowers the Office of Inspector General to review the justification for CDCR banning books in the libraries. I don't even want to talk about that one. AB 280, Holden, Mandela Act, restricts solitary confinement within CDCR detention facilities. Health, AB 1975, Bonta, makes medically necessary food and nutrition services a permanent part of Medi-Cal benefits in California. Senate Bill SB 1089, Smallwood Cuevas, requires advanced notification to community stakeholders prior to the closure of a grocery store in underserved or at-risk communities. As we all know, the best food and quality food is not in underserved communities, like mine in South LA. Education, AB 1929, McKinnon, expand access to career technical education by creating a grant program to increase enrollment of slavery descendants in STEM, science and technology, engineering, and math, career technical education programs at high school and college level. AB 3131, McCarty, adds an additional preference category for grant applicants historically redlined communities when applying for career education and financial aid programs. Business, AB 2862, Gibson expands AB 2138 to eliminate barriers for African-American applicants seeking occupational licenses, especially those who are descendants with prior criminal convictions. And last but not least, AB 1815 Weber expands the Crown Act protections to all competitive sports and prohibits discrimination based on natural and protective hairstyles. As you all been reading, they're telling people who have hairstyles that do not agree with certain people in parts of the country that they can't participate in graduation or in sports activities because of their hairstyles. That's just, we just cannot have that happen here in California. We are the wave. We are the blue wave. We are the ones that are going to make things happen. If we don't make it happen here in California, it's not going to happen anywhere else. I don't care where other people tell you other states are doing other things. If we don't make it happen here, it won't happen anywhere else. And I'm just proud in my last year that I can at least start it. I will tell you that the California Legislative Black Caucus, there are about oh my God, 113 different recommendations. This is just the tip of the iceberg. And so we're gonna need you not only now with these 14, but as we move forward with the others, as we make more and more progress on reversing the racism that's run through this community. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Assembly Member. Before you go, I just wanted to see, you know, you ran through a lot of really important bills there. And our legislative committee, as we were talking about before the meeting, is going to be considering these. Which of the bills are the most important as far as that the Democratic Club from Santa Monica getting behind it, calling our legislators, calling into the committee meetings that would make the biggest difference so that we know what to prioritize our efforts?
So we're going through everything right now. As we start to push them out, we're going to find out which one needs the most wind beneath their sail to make it happen.
Yeah.
I'll give you an example. I'm just assuming that my apology letter that none of the Republicans will vote for it, but every Democrat will. I'm assuming, and you know, when you assume, the Crown Act, which should be very simple to do, should not need a whole lot of backing to make that happen. But I could be wrong. There's some MAGA Republicans in the Assembly that could make a kerfuffle about any one of these bills. And as soon as it happens, we're gonna have to call you and have you in action almost immediately. We need you to obviously to say you support all of them. But when it comes to writing letters, we're gonna have to call you to make sure we're not having you write letters on things that we know are gonna pass, won't have any problems. We need to make sure it's done in a way where once we know it's gonna happen, we sound the alarm and you can act quickly. And so whoever in your legislative group, I need to be able to get you active almost immediately. Contact you.
Great. Let's move, we'll hold the questions until the end if that's okay. So now I think Dr. Shauna Charles is going to give a quick presentation about Restore Black California.
Hi, good evening. I'm Dr. Shauna Charles, and I actually have been working with the task force when they were a task force, and I am currently working with the California Legislative Black Caucus. As you hear, there's a lot of talk about reparations, California and across the nation, but as you know, California was the first task force in the nation to do this work. And the CLBC is the first one to come out with their reparation package. And so we want to make sure that Californians understand what they're doing, how they're doing it. It is a complex topic. It has so many moving pieces. So they're starting their campaign now. They have launched their reparations package, and we just want to go over with you some of the things that they have come up with to make sure it's easy to understand. We also have a poll. If you could just give us your feedback, we'd be greatly appreciated. So I introduce myself, Charles Communication Group. I run a communications agency here in LA, and this is just the type of work that we do. As you know, I know Dr. Grills, thank you for setting me up with this. Talks about what has been happening. Now, reparations has been talked about for quite a while now, but in California, you can see some of the things that were happening. AB 3121 was signed by the governor, as well as launching the first in the nation task force with the 9 task force members. They have wrote a phenomenal report of 1,100 pages. I know it's a lot, it can be daunting, but I suggest you all at least flip through it to see what it's talking about and the recommendations that they have done. There are over 300 recommendations and sub-recommendations, so take a look at that. That's how some of the bills were actually created. So as you can see here, this is just a quote from the governor, and this was right after the George Floyd, where he says,
I hope we can lean into this moment, but in the spirit of so many lives that are impacted every day, to address the structural racism and institutions that fundamentally have to change. So as you can see, systemic, structural racism, all of these words are consistently used because this goes so far back, the oppression. So working with the CLBC, actually, the picture here is actually of the report. You can see the CLBC here. They're trying to translate this entire book that was done by DOJ and the task force into policy. That is their job, and that is what they're trying to do as the next step. All right. So one of the things that they're really looking at is the massive wealth gap that is happening. As you can see here, the median white Los Angeles family's net worth, take a look at that number. Take a look at the number for the median US Black Los Angeles family's net worth. It is like, I'll tell, hold on.
Okay, trying to move the transcript to the
Wow.
way.
Wow. Look at the difference there. Okay, this doesn't happen overnight. This happens from years and years and years of oppression. You can move to the next slide, please. Sorry. But when we think about wealth, right, if you hear a lot, there are all these numbers thrown around about cash compensation, and compensation is a part of reparations. But it's not just financial wealth, it is all these additional things. It's safety, it's good health, it's a quality education, career options, it's appreciable assets, and of course, it's just family legacy. So when we think about reparations, we don't want to just think about it from a compensation perspective, and that gets a lot of weight when it comes to reparations. We want to think of it as a holistic life and lifestyle for people. So one of the things we thought about was, how do we look at California, right? California is like a home we all inherited and share. To protect it for the next generations, it is our responsibility to address the cracks and the buckling that exist, even if we were not the ones that created them. So, according to the Public Policy Institute of California, you can see that the 3 of the top 5 concerns among Californians include the economy, homelessness, and it's crime, gangs, and drugs. Okay, next slide for me, please. So the mission that the CLBC is taking as they are moving forward with their reparation package is to help close the racial wealth gap caused by the atrocities, and we haven't really even talked about the atrocities yet, and they are horrible, of slavery and systemic racism for the future of California. Here also is a quote here by, I believe it is Victoria Woodhill. I'll let you guys just take a second to read it, but it just talks about the importance of the foundation and fixing that foundation for what is to come. All right, so the goal here is really around reparations, but reparations, looking at restoring and restoration. And how do we do that? Can you look at that? Sorry, that's okay. Thank you. No, it's fine. So what we're looking at is a campaign overview. As you can see, I have on the shirt, the assembly member does, but it's really looking at restoring Black California for all California, because this is an effort that cannot be done in a silo. It takes all of us to understand it. And as the assembly member said, we get reparations, everyone else gets reparations, and we continue to move. And he is correct. There was a reparations bill that just came out for the land that was taken for Dodger Stadium. So this is something that people are really looking at and are catching on to. So we put a poll together just to help the CLBC understand.
Oh, of course, and the transcript keeps.
We put a poll together. If you guys could just take out your phones, just 8 simple questions that help the CLBC understand how they're messaging, understanding if it's easy for people to understand, because we do understand that this is a complex topic, and we do want people to be able to understand it, support it, and then ask any necessary questions.
You want to give people time to do this?
Oh, yeah.
Or
Yeah.
Take a few minutes.
And the people on the Zoom.
Yeah, so it's shared, so that screen is shared right now, so everybody on Zoom should be seeing that on their screens. People on Zoom, if you can't see it, let us know.
Yeah, we can see it.
That's a good question. So when you solve the wealth gap,
I don't know what to do.
you take a picture of this on your phone.
When people saw the wealth gap side, especially when she moved, there was a gasp in the room. Did that catch you? Was that stark? Was that something like you went, oh my God?
Yes.
Is that important for us to let people know?
Yes.
Okay.
I would have run out of here if you guys.
Just a little thing, just the way it accidentally happened was really good.
And then.
You didn't know what it was and you had to think and think and think, and then when you saw it, I think that's what the surprise was. If it had been there from the beginning, I don't think you would have had.
And that number is one of many. If you open up that report and you see some of the statistics in that report, you will gasp. So just know it's deep. So I guess we'll take, what, about another minute or so?
Well, yeah, I mean, people can.
Finish it? Okay.
Can you just post the 8 questions, because we can't figure out how to get this.
Let me see if I can maybe like copy the URL.
And you can also send it out.
Okay.
You have the PowerPoint, so you can, if you guys have an email list, you can.
We'll send it to the email list.
Okay, so the last one is just how you guys can support, the COBC, and of course, if you have any ideas and you have any questions, calreparations@gmail. Please, Dr. Grills talked about it, support, reparations.org. It's over, how many now, Dr. Grills? It's like 600 organizations that have signed up to really support this effort in any way that they can. Of course, you can host and attend events, and as well as just, speak to your legislative representatives. The link in the bottom is how you can find it, and just, please let your community know that this is happening. Thank you.
Are you sending out the 8 questions now? In an email?
So we will send out the link to that poll for folks who aren't able to get it on Zoom or didn't bring their phone with them. I think Natalia is also working on getting the link into the chat. But people watch on YouTube, so it'd be good to have it available for people who are not watching live. Okay, so thank you so much for that presentation. We're now going to go to talk about 2 specific examples of land return and reparations. One obviously is the one that is happening here, but before that we're going to look at Bruce's Beach. It happened down in Manhattan Beach. So we have 2 speakers coming to speak on that. First up is, well, they'll both come up together, but first is Kavan Ward, who is an award-winning spoken word artist, former Congressional Black Caucus Fellow, a public policy activist. She founded Justice for Bruce's Beach on Juneteenth, 2020, when she partnered with Black Lives Matter to call for restitution and restoration for the Bruce family. She's a reparative justice consultant and co-founder of Where Is My Land, an organization focused on getting Black land back nationally. So let's bring up Kavan. And additionally, we will be hearing from Wesley Burrell, who is a complex commercial litigator and financial services partner in the LA office of Munger, Tullis and Olson. He also maintains an active pro bono practice seeking justice for the most vulnerable, successfully representing clients ranging from community development organizations whose mission is to provide low-income housing to the city's most at-risk tenants, to asylum seekers and domestic human trafficking victims in civil litigation against their former enslavers and traffickers. Wes also won a significant victory defending the city of Manhattan Beach's decision to return the historic Bruce's Beach property to its rightful owners, the Bruce family heirs, remediating 100-year-old justice. So now we'll, try to have a conversational discussion here with both of them. But I wanted to start with Kavan and then go to Wes from there. So how did you first learn about the Bruce's Beach case and how did you become involved with advocacy there?
Lord, I first.
And I'm sorry, but we want to make sure everyone can hear something.
So I first learned about Bruce's Beach. I lived in Manhattan Beach for about 4 years. But I learned about Bruce's Beach shortly after George Floyd was murdered. I remember going to some of my Facebook mom groups and just complaining about how Black lives don't matter in this country. And I remember other Black moms posting on in that same group, and our posts were being deleted. Meanwhile, Latin people, white people were posting about the death of George Floyd, and none of their posts were being deleted. And so a number of women saw this, a number of mothers of all different backgrounds saw it. And so they spoke up. They said, why are Black women continuing to be silenced? This should be an outlet. This should be a safe space for them to be able to talk about how they're feeling harmed. And so when we all were deleted from the group, we decided to start our own group called South Bay Moms Around, Moms Around the South Bay. And it later turned into anti-racist movements around the South Bay. So I remember being in that mom group, and I remember one of the mothers sending me a blog post from back in 2007 that spoke about Charles and Willa Bruce and how the name of the park was being changed to honor them. And I was just so distraught about George Floyd. I didn't even read the entire thing, but then someone on another social media platform sent me that same article within a short period of time. And I'm like, if I'm getting this for a second time, I need to pay attention to it. And then when I read it, I was heated. I could not believe that I lived in a city where, I mean, I'm not gonna say I couldn't believe it happened in that city, because I could. It was a very, very white city, and you could tell from, it was very anti-Black. My first week living there, I took my daughter, who was at the time a couple of months old, to the park, and her face was covered up. It's Pollywog Park, and a white woman sat next to me, an older white woman, and asked me what family I nannied for. So I kind of knew very early on that it was an anti-Black space. But I was surprised that there was no information about Charles and Willa Bruce. There was this plaque there that looked like a tombstone. And when you read it, you see that it was very whitewashed, and it looked like it was inaccurate and incomplete. And so when I read deeper about it, I was like, oh, sure. Like, I'm living in a city that literally removed Black people, Black entrepreneurs, and I'm a Black entrepreneur. And I just couldn't, I just felt like they were trying to hide it. So the group and I decided to shed light on it. And we did it during COVID, but we had this socially distanced gathering at Bruce's Beach Park just to illuminate what had happened to folks. And then I remember two of the cousins coming out, Patricia and Vivian Bruce, that had known about this, of course, because this was their family. And they said, you know, thank you so much for shedding light on this. How can we help you, like, do whatever it is that you want to do? Are you going to do more? And then the news reporter asked me what I wanted to see happen. I remember vividly saying that, you know, I'm glad that we are shedding light on this, but I want to see the land given back to the family. I will never forget, I was like, I want to see the land given back to the family. And then from that moment on, I obsessed over it. And I thought, I started to think about my, you know, my advocacy days on the Hill, and like how I was able to make things happen and create policy change on the Hill. And so I just went into full force and met with one of the other family members who had done research about it. And I said, okay, can I help you? Can I amplify this? And then I just started interviewing. I just started putting stuff about this story out on the media. I started putting pressure on government officials and people in power. And I remember there was an LA Times article that came out, and then it just blew up. And so after that, it took really trying to find a family legal representation. I remember reaching out to public counsel, and I believe they're the ones who connected you to the family. I remember just speaking to Senator Bradford and asking how we could help. And when he introduced SB 796, I was like, all right, we got to get on this. We got to get people to, you know, write letters. We got to get people to call in. We got to get people to just make sure that this vote passes. And it did unanimously in the Assembly and in the Senate. So community activism is really what got us here. It wasn't just a me thing. Yes, I drove it. It was my vision, but it took the stars being aligned. It took LA County Board of Supervisors, all of those people being where they were in the right place. It took Senator Bradford, it took Governor Newsom, it took all these people playing their role and playing it properly and make sure that this thing happened. But and that's how it happened. And now here I am after starting Justice for Bruce's Beach. I remember being inundated with emails from about 200 people asking if I could help them. And these are people from all across the country. And so I felt like, you know, I had the platform, I had the resources, I had, you know, the wherewithal to be able to make this happen for other people. And so I started Where Is My Land, which is a national organization. And shortly after that, Alana Davis right here reached out to me. Connie White, actually, Silas White's daughter reached out with Milana asking if we could help. And here we are now with Every Beach Club.
Yeah, I'm also interested, Wes, to hear from you, how you got involved with this case and your initial experiences were.
Like Yvonne said, we were, my firm was connected, Mike Swell, my partner, was in the litigation team with me. We are a former partner of ours through public counsel, a friend of mine, George Fothery. He had begun working with those in the legislative side of it, which is the part that really that's where the action happened. There's a piece that must be done and had to be done here, a process piece that had to go through the state, it had to go through the county. And we knew as that process was undertaken, there's going to be a challenge. So the litigation team, which is where I came in, and Mike and the team that we were on, was prepared to defend against the challenge that would come. Because when you do this kind of work, there's always going to be a challenge. And what we did was work off of work others had done on, and there was actually there's some good evidence that had been developed, because in 1959 there was a master's thesis written about Bruce's Beach and what had happened by a gentleman at Cal State Fresno, Brigham, and Robert Brigham, I think. And he had marshaled some of this evidence, and then we did some work on that as well. By the time that it had come to my firm, we also, in fact, actually, we had to go in during COVID. The Hall of Records was flooded, and they had to go in hazmat suits to dig up some of the evidence, because I was asked, what's the standard? That's what's the issue when it comes to litigation side, when you're defending this. It's what is the standard that the court is going to look at. And I want to read you a bit from the opinion, because it's pretty clear cut, actually. So this is the opinion issued ultimately when there was a challenge. The challenge was denied, and it went through. And this is from the court. Righting a government wrong perpetrated in breach of our core fundamental constitutional principles works to strengthen governmental integrity, represents accountability in government, and works to eliminate structural racism and bias. The government's act of rectifying a prior egregious wrong based on racism fosters trust and respect in government. And that's part of what Assemblymember Jones is saying, that when we do this work for one part of our community, we do this work for the whole of the community. That's why this work is important. And the court recognized this. It was in 1868 that the equal protection provision went into law. Well, it was far past that they took Bruce's Beach, and it's far past that all these injustices were perpetrated. So we have an opportunity now, which is unique, to undo that, and it's got to be undone through community activism, but also through the bravery and the forward thinking, the backward thinking of those who are in our government, of those of us who are active, of those of us who are in positions of power where we can actually seek to undo some of these things. But I'm gonna, indulge me for a moment, because I want to tell you just a tiny bit about the evidence that was here, because the question that was posed was what's required. So there's a great degree of deference in the court when you get to the point where we were at, where you're before the court, someone's challenging it, the court's gonna defer to the legislature. If the legislature has not been acting arbitrarily, if there is some evidence, then it's defensible. But you've got to get your evidence. Evidence can be read different ways. So in Bruce's Beach, we like I said, we had some of this history was there. So not to steal, the professor gave us a very good history lesson. And this is to fill in some further evidence from that history. So the board voted in 1924, and it unanimously passed the ordinance that stole the land, or that took the land. And the trustee that introduced that ordinance was then interviewed. He was on a program in 1943, because you could still say the quiet part out loud at that time. And he went ahead and did so. And he said, at one time, we thought the Negro problem was going to stop our progress in Manhattan Beach. There were several families, the blacks would come in, he said, with their banners, and they would want to be on the beach. That's my paraphrase at that last bit. Most of this has been verbatim. We had to acquire these 2 blocks to solve the problem, the Negro problem. We voted to condemn these 2 blocks and make a city park. We had to protect ourselves. Our attorney advised us, the members of the council, never to admit the real purpose in establishing the park, especially during the council meeting. Those Negroes were Americans and had as much right to be there as we did. This is his quote. I always felt that it was a mean trick to make those people leave their homes, but it was the only way out. Being a member of the board, I had to participate or give up Manhattan Beach. So this is some of what we were able to present to the court. And then at the time, the Manhattan Beach Taxpayer League had a problem with this. But the problem they had was that their money was being taken for this purpose, which everyone could agree was a good purpose, but it wasn't going to be effective. They actually raised that. They said the original idea was to get the colored people out. Well, does this accomplish it? No. We want 100% white in Manhattan Beach. I'm quoting. So we that's part of what we had to grab from the Hall of Records. That's what the hazmat suits. I believe that's what the hazmat suit got. Because it's buried. It says the trustees came back against the taxpayers, and they said, look, the steps taken to acquire the former stronghold of the Negroes in this city was very definite gesture that the citizens of the city, while having respect for the rights of the colored man, very respectful. Through the action taken to acquire the park in the north end of Manhattan Beach, the serious aspect of the Negro question has been entirely eliminated. And the people of Los Angeles can no longer refer to this city as the Negro Beach. My father grew up in South Central Los Angeles, and my children wonder why he doesn't know how to swim. That's why I didn't know how to swim. There weren't any beaches for him. So that's not often out there. We did get a ruling from the court also acknowledge that circumstantial evidence also can be effective to prove these, because you don't get those kinds of admissions frequently, but we look for them. But in this case, it also was helpful that there was a lot right next to Manhattan Beach. It was undeveloped, it was white owned, and go figure, they didn't build the beach there. They had to take the developed land that all the black folk owned. So that was also something that the court found compelling. But with this evidence, and the fact that the legislature had made the decision, and the county had bravely, I mean, Los Angeles County is perhaps the first county to do something like this. I mean, I don't know, you would be able,
This is the first time land was returned to a Black family in this country.
this is,
Wow.
so, and if Santa Monica were to do something, it would be the first city in the country to do this. We had, when you were when they gave Manhattan Beach back, there was a guy there from Georgia, right? I don't know how many,
Yes.
yes, who'd come out to see the work that
Yes.
she'd done,
Yeah.
the work that the county had done. Because he wanted to catch that vision. Because there's an opportunity here. Thanks for indulging.
I mean, it's hard to follow up some of that evidence with another question. I guess I would just throw it back to both of you. I mean, in terms of the next steps that happened, you know, this is the evidence that came forward and then the county made the decision. What do you want to walk us through, Kaban, your experience coming from just bringing this forward? You talked about how you got involved. We heard from Wes about, you know, the case that was made, and so what were the next steps that you experienced, and you can take us all the way through to the end, I guess.
I mean, for me, so when you say what happened, I immediately think about how my life was threatened. I immediately think about how I had to leave Manhattan Beach. I immediately think about how I wasn't safe. And I think about how I was labeled essentially public enemy #1 until the county got involved and until the governor said, yes, we're gonna do this. You know, that's what I think about. I think about just this immense amount of pressure and this burden lifted from off of my shoulders. And now I felt like, although I wasn't my safest, I had some sort of protection, you know? Because I went from everyone handing me Manhattan Beach to now everybody wanting to talk to me, or everybody wanting me to be at their events. And it was very, very disappointing. But in terms of what happened with the case, you know, we had, I think it was in April of 2022 was when LA County Board of Supervisors had their press conference. Am I correct, Carolyn? And it was 2020, no, it was 2021. I remember it taking a very short amount of time for them to actually commit to giving the land back. So in April of 2021, they committed to giving the land back. I remember by September, they had been inundated with this lawsuit, but then they had said, you know what, we're finally here, we're making it official, we're going to get the land back. Now, I wasn't really involved with the nuances of the actual lawsuit and the negotiations, but I just remember understanding and knowing and feeling in my gut that it would happen, but not knowing that it would happen so quickly. And then by July of 2022, the actual land was being transferred. And then I remember shortly after that, the family decided to sell it back. And I didn't agree with that, but that's what happened. I mean, perhaps you can speak from the legal perspective because you were more engaged in that, but from my perspective as an activist, I just remember shortly after the governor saying, we're gonna give this land back, then being inundated with emails and starting, where's my land, and starting to focus on building the infrastructure, where's my land, fundraising for where is my land, and then trying to help as many families as I could.
So Wes, I mean, one of the questions I have for you, I mean, you know, so we have these great speakers here, but you're, as Kaban just said, you're the representative from sort of the legal world of all of this. And so I guess I'm wondering, you know, when these cases happen, there's precedent that's created. And so what is the precedent from Bruce's Beach that would apply to other cases looking forward, and that would change how these land returns are seen and how they proceed, that would be different from what you experienced in the Bruce's Beach case?
So without getting too hyper technical, by which I mean, as I'm gonna get hyper technical. So you have precedent is a matter of a case being brought to a court that can set precedent that governs in subsequent cases. There's something that happens when you come, that's why we all care what the Supreme Court tells us, right? And so in Bruce's Beach, the law was clear and the court found that the law was clear. And it did not go up on appeal and it made no binding precedent, but it set a precedent. You can take, and this is the precedent set, it's part of what I read to you. The question is it a proper public purpose for a legislature or a city council to decide to give back something that was taken wrongly? Is that a proper government purpose? Because what the other side is going to tell you is no. This is to benefit an individual, a private individual. Why should public lands be used in that way? That's improper. And the question is it just? And if justice itself is a proper purpose. And so the precedent established by the case that we tried found that, yes, that's what I read to you. That's a proper government purpose. And so then it becomes a question of whether or not you could show racial animus. And that's the evidence that we were discussing. And that's a question, that's a fact-bound question. So it'll be a case-by-case basis. But as far as the precedent itself, this is a precedent-setting movement. And we are early, hopefully early. So it's a good precedent. That was set in Bruce's Beach because we were successful early and the court heard us. And so. Yeah.
Great, well, thank you so much. And before we go to the Ebony Beach Club section, I just wanted to see, Wes, if you had anything else you wanted to share, and or Kavan, if you had anything else you wanted to bring up that pertains to the Bruce's Beach element of the discussion.
No.
No, okay, so you're all good. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so our next speaker literally needs no introduction in Santa Monica Democratic Club, which is why we're not we know her, Carolyn Tarosa, council member. And so I think let's start the same way. I'm gonna go to Kavan first and then we go to Carolyn, but you know, how did this, you sort of teased it talking to the descendants of Silas White, but maybe you can just set up this whole story about what happened, you know, Bruce's Beach, we're talking about from the 1920s. This one's a few decades later, so the political context back then is a little bit different, but can you explain the history and then also how you got involved?
So Silas White, Black entrepreneur, another Black entrepreneur. He had several businesses in Santa Monica prior to wanting to purchase the Old Elks Lodge, which is formerly known as Ebony Beach Club. His intent was to turn it into a space that Black people could enjoy leisure, where they could dance, where there could be jazz played, where they could feel at home in a very white space that where they really never felt comfortable. And so he applied for the permits to make the changes to the club, and when the city caught wind of that, they stopped him from developing the club. They stopped him from, you know, formally, they stopped his dream. They killed his dream essentially. And so by 1960, the land was razed, it was demolished, it was gone, it was taken from him, and he died shortly after that, essentially. So not only was his dream killed, but I believe that the immense amount of racism and just fight he had to endure to try to make Ebony Beach Club happen killed him. And so Milana White, who's here, Milana Davis, who is here, who is the niece of Silas White, she always says, you know, I had no idea, I didn't know about this story because Connie, who was Silas's daughter, never talked about it because it was so harmful and she was so hurt by it. But Connie saw coverage of Bruce's speech and she felt compelled, and I guess she felt like there was more hope. And so she reached out to us back in, I believe, 2022, and asked if we could help her get her land back. And I just remember Connie, she lives in Northern California. She's elderly, so she can't really be down here that much. But I remember Milana stepping up and us working very closely together. And this story was so sad. It was so just, it was so harmful that we didn't really need to do a lot to push the story on social media. I believe like we posted one thing about the story to amplify what happened, and we got major interviews from CBS. There were just a lot of newspapers who were interested in covering the story. But then after that, we were like, then what? What next, right? Like we had been amplifying a lot of stories from a lot of our families. And so I didn't want it to be a situation where, okay, now people know about the history and they say, oh, that's sad. It's like, how do we take action? How do we move? And how do we get people to feel so bad about this that they feel inspired to move and to make things happen for this family? And so we created a petition. And then we got more news interviews. And then last year in December, Milana reached out and said, you know, me and Connie want to write a letter to the city council because they just paid someone some money for some harm that was done. And they're not doing anything about what happened to our family, to Silas. And so we put our heads together and we wrote a letter to the city council. And we sent that letter to the city council. And it was a very scathing letter. And we sent it to all members of the city council, including the city manager. And only Carolyn got back to us. Carolyn was the only one that got back to us and says, you're right, I think we need to do more. Would love to sit down and talk with you. And she set up a meeting with herself, the city manager, Where's My Land, community activists. Robbie was there and Milana was there, and we sat and we talked about wanting repair for that harm, and repair not being something that was a plaque or something that was performative, right? And we provided documentation about what happened, although I think the city knew what happened. I mean, they have it on their own museum website that the land was stolen from Silas White. So they knew about it, but they weren't willing to address it. And that was indicative of the amount of people who showed up to that meeting. And so I think that's when all hell broke loose, right, Carolyn? I think folks were upset that, you know, Carolyn met with us. They claimed that they didn't know anything about a meeting request. And so we had to re-forward it to them. And of course, they apologized for not seeing it. But then we started taking up space at city council meetings. We started getting the community more involved and asking folks to show up and really speak up for Silas White and and speak up for repair, not just talk about what happened, because we all knew at that point, but how do you repair the harm done? And not, again, not a plaque. How do you give that land back? We made it very clear we wanted. We wanted the land back, and we wanted financial compensation for over 60 years of lost business enterprise. And there was a lot that went down during those weeks when we attended those city council meetings. But eventually, last week, in fact, the council voted unanimously to look into what repair would be for the White family within 90 days. And Carolyn can speak more to it. I don't want to tell all the business.
Yeah, and I know, first of all, I just want to say thank you to everyone who's here, hopefully in solidarity with this movement, because no one group or one people can do this alone. I mean, this obviously requires solidarity because we're better together, right? And so I think just in terms of what happened, I think it would also be worth noting that I worked for Supervisor Holly Mitchell, and she is one of the women on the LA County Board of Supervisors. Although I'm not her housing deputy, I'm very familiar with the process that we went through to return Bruce's Beach. And so I think I was fortunate to know about that, but also fortunate that I work with a team of people who really care about this day in and day out, who are doing the work day in and day out. And I was definitely aware of Ebony Beach Club. Aware of Ebony Beach Club because of the work of the Committee for Racial Justice, because of the work of Robbie, because of the work of historians in the city who have been looking into this. And I was very sure that there would be no one else on the council who would be interested in returning the land. I know this is being recorded, so I won't say too much, but I had in fact told the city manager, maybe we should do something. And the settlement money that Kavan is referring to is related to some allegations of sexual assault, so slightly different, but also, harm, right? And so I think that, it's never convenient to do the right thing, but I feel so fortunate that Kavan is an amazing organizer and she should be teaching a class in organizing. I mean, I'm sure you are, but it was the perfect opportunity when I saw this email because I was like, okay, great. There are people who are interested. And honestly, if it weren't for the pressure and the work that she and the White family put in, and really where is my land in her work and getting folks to our council meetings, not once, but 3 times. I don't think that the council would have voted unanimously because the public pressure matters. So all of us being here matters, all of us working together matters. When Assemblyman Jones said, I'm gonna call you, we need you on our bills. We all have to be in solidarity to do this work together if we're gonna repair past harms. So not just talk about it, be about it. In terms of what we're gonna do, like was mentioned, I actually looked up and you said, what was the date of the press conference on Bruce's Beach? The Board of Supervisors went from about April 2021 to June 2022, more or less in the actions that were happening. So I have no illusions that this is gonna happen in 90 days, but what's important is that in 90 days, when the recommendations come back, that we still have community at the table, because it's not one and done. Hi, we showed up, we passed a motion, but there's way more work still to do. And I think that every set of circumstances is going to be a little bit different. I'd love to talk with the lawyers about how we can get some help on this, because I definitely think we're gonna need some. There is more research that we want to do. We obviously intend to show racial animus, but if you look at the pictures from the Santa Monica History Museum of Ebony Beach Club at the time that this was happening, Mr. White had literally put signs on Ebony Beach Club saying, do not take this, the city is racist, it's trying to take my property. I'm paraphrasing, but like he knew, and there were signs and there were pictures of this. It also wasn't that long ago. We're talking about like 1957 to 1960. So hopefully we can find some records, but what we have asked for is not just like investigate this and come back. The motion that we passed asked for the historical records, asked for the proof of racial animus, asked for a plan for recommendations around compensation for lost revenue. We saw the wealth gap, things like theft of land contributes to that wealth gap. We want to help folks acquire multi-generational wealth. Part of that is this. And then also looking at possible options to return the land, because we know this is not a one and done process. We will have to go through a legal process to do that if we were to return the land. The other thing that folks should know is that it's not the entirety of the Viceroy property, it's a portion of the property where the Viceroy is. And so how do we work that out? Obviously there is a business enterprise on the property. So I think there are still some unanswered questions, but it's really important that we're working together, because I love living in Santa Monica. Yes, we have a lot of racist history. Yes, we have a lot of work to do here, but I also love that we're a community that wants to be on the side of justice. And I think in 20, 30 years, when we look back at this movement and this moment, I really hope that all of us in this room are going to say, look, we stood together to be on the right side of history here, because this is just the beginning. So I just really want to thank Kavan and all of her work and everyone who's been in this movement for so much longer than I have.
So, Councilmember Teresa, I wanted to follow up with you on that last point. I was going to ask you about your item, but since you just went through it, can you speak to what you're hoping to see the city manager come back with? And I mean, a couple of years ago, this is just part of a black neighborhood that at that time was completely destroyed. And I remember just a couple of years ago when they were naming Belmar Park, it was like the big thought was, let's add the word historic to historic Belmar Park instead of just Belmar Park. So I don't think, you know, Kavan mentioned not wanting to just be a plaque, but to take real action. So what are the types of action that you're hoping to see? And also, can you speak a little bit more to the Viceroy, the business, the enterprise that's on the land and how that might be navigated? I mean, if you can, I know part of it is, you know, a city issue. So whatever you can speak to on those topics.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Bills. You're fantastic and amazing. I'm not trying to call you out, but it's late and I'm sure people want to go. No, but you are amazing and I just had to acknowledge that. Yeah. So to me, I'm just speaking for myself. Obviously, we have to have all of the documentation, but to me, it's return of the land and repairing past harm, meaning monetary compensation. That's what that means to me. We need, you know, 4 other votes for that, but I do want to say that we have asked the city manager and team to pull all the historical records. And I would anticipate that there's a lot of fact finding that still needs to be done because we have a little bit of information, but I mean, I don't know, we haven't gone to the Hall of Records in a hazmat suit yet, so we might need to be doing that. I mean, I would love to see more contemporaneous recordings of the time on what was happening and some of the commentary that was going on at the time. So yeah, I mean, John, I think we have a little bit more work to do. I don't think we've done the full fact finding process, but to me, you know, it's returning the land. And I talked with Kavan and Moana about this, but because it's not exactly the same as Bruce's Beach, there's actually a business enterprise on the property. Is this a situation where you do some sort of long-term ground lease of the land back to the city for some sort of compensation, like after we return the land in title to the owner, to the rightful owners? You know, that is certainly an option, but I think we'd have to look at like some sort of legal structure for what that looks like. And also, again, part of the land we anticipate is part of the Viceroy, part of the parking lot, and part of an easement for the city. So there's like one slice of the property. So there's still some analysis that's needed.
Thanks, and to Kavan, I mean, I speak from personal experience. I was there at the last meeting and I saw that you had, I mean, dozens of people that were there to speak. You really did an amazing job organizing around this, and I guess I would want to know more about how you put this group of people together, and also what we can do at the Santa Monica Democratic Club to, you know, remain part of that coalition and help you to affect the change when this item comes, that when they recommend solutions, it's not going to be as easy to get 7 votes, I would think, because it's going to be not just let's look into it, but here's what we can do, and there may be pushback there. So you know, you've done this on Bruce's Beach. We were talking about you've got your eye on a lot of other properties around the state. What do you think is the next step to organize to push us over the finish line?
So I just want to say that, you know, when I think about organizing, I think about community members like Robbie Jones and CRJ, right? Making sure that I have alliances with them because they have boots on the ground in the community. And ultimately, like, I need to know who the players are. I need to know, you know, what their recommendations are because they already have boots on the ground around matters things that matter to them in this community because they live here. So that was a part of the organizing. I also reached out to folks that I used to help me organize through Bruce's Beach. I mean, those people are still there waiting and ready for me to call on them. And then it was getting the petition circulating, you know, making sure that I use the relationships I have with like social media influencers, especially who are historians, right? Black historians, making sure that we use them to amplify the message and get their people to come out. So a lot of it was done through social media. Yeah. Honestly, and then just me reaching out to folks who are part of the community and reaching out to people who help with Roosevelt Beach. There were a lot of people all throughout LA who were there too. And so I'm just fortunate enough to be able to maintain those relationships with them, because when I ask them to come, they come. I mean, I think they all want to see reparations and that they all want to be a part of making reparations happen. So it's just making sure that I foster those relationships and build new ones and bring everybody together. So I hope you all are there next city council meeting, the Democratic Party, but thank you for being there, John, and you, I mean, there was some people.
There's several
familiar
people here
faces
who were there.
That were there, so I thank you all for being there.
I just want to say something I neglected to mention, because Dr. Grills mentioned it, and I think to a lesser extent, Assemblymember Thompson mentioned it. In November of 2022, the city of Santa Monica, in case you don't know, adopted a Black apology. So we adopted a very lengthy Black apology about all of the things that we needed to do to repair past harm, right? But then nothing happened. We literally have Black apology and then nothing happened. So if we're gonna actually repair past harm, we're actually going to take those next steps, just like the Reparations Task Force report states, we have to start taking actionable steps. Another situation, and so we have a director of equity and inclusion in the city manager's office. She's been doing listening sessions throughout the entire community. This is not the only thing that's happening. She's going to come back with a set of recommendations. We need your help on multiple fronts, not just this. But there's also land that the city civic center stands on, that was allegedly, again, you know, we would have to look into this, taken from Black families in Santa Monica. And there are other instances where we need to think long and hard about what this past actions the city's done. Because I want to be better, right? So I think just this is the beginning.
Oh, can I say one other thing? I think you asked about what's next. I think approaching this from a family by family basis is extremely stressful and taxing. And so one of the things that I'm also doing is I'm working with Senator Bradford on trying to push forward SB 1050. I think you mentioned that, and that is to return land from folks who have had it stolen in eminent domain. So we just submitted a bunch of recommendations to his team. And we're going to be amplifying that bill a lot and trying to get people to vote for it. So that's what we're working on next, so that it's not just a one-off here, a one-off there. It's like all right there in the city.
Awesome. Well, let's give them a round of applause. I really want to thank both of you, Siobhan, for your advocacy, and Carolyn for bringing this to the council and forcing the subject, you know, have this conversation in the city. It's really important. You know, I said it in my remarks to council, and you just mentioned it now. We can't just have a written Black apology. You know, we actually have to take the next steps and put this into action. So speaking for myself, I'll be there when this comes back, and I really hope that everybody here tonight, everybody watching is interested in participating and following up. Yeah, Dan.
John, if it's appropriate, and by my reading of bylaws, I think it is, because it's not been a good item. I'd like to make a motion that we support this movement, and specifically that we support restitution and return of the land and lost business enterprise.
Second. Okay, we have a motion from Dan, seconded by Craig. Any discussion? Yeah, Craig.
In light of question and answer session, let me first be on record in understanding the role that the legislature plays in this, because reparations is indeed a legislative act. And so I am in awe when the government can fund Israel, but speak up, give a blind eye and a deaf ear to reparations. That would have been my question, but rather than more or less go through that, let me just be on record as saying that and speaking for this motion.
Thanks. Jeff. Yeah. Okay, yeah, Joe. Sure, yeah. Okay, yeah, so just to clarify, so just from a procedural perspective, there's a motion that was made and seconded. So we're in discussion. It's a totally valid question and Dan's gonna answer it now.
So I think if the facts come back as expected, then the motion would be to support return of the land and monetary compensation for lost business enterprise.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so let's have a vote. And of course, this is for members who are in good standing only. So all those who support the motion, please raise your hand.
Stand by while I attempt to get a number from the screen.
Okay, I count 17 in person.
Okay, 6 hands raised, so 7 hands raised in the Zoom so far, unless there's some people who are
Yeah.
raising hands that I.
Natalia, make that 8.
8.
There's 1 hand and 8 digitals. Oh, now it's still 8.
Okay.
Okay, we can read. Okay, so 24 in favor and all opposed. Funny with the virtual hand, you want to assume the best. But I saw somebody stand up before, so I don't think that. Okay, so I'm not seeing any hands raised.
Okay.
And any abstentions? Okay, so the motion passes. Thanks, Dan.
Thanks, Dan.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. So I want to thank all the speakers, including Dr. Grills, who just stepped away, but we're really grateful for all of you to help us become educated on this topic. And, you know, as insinuated based on the fact that this is coming back to council, this is just the beginning of a process that we are now on the record that we're going to be part of going forward. So really grateful for you to be here, for everyone for listening, and we'll continue the meeting, but thanks so much for your perspective. Okay, so now we're going to continue the legislative process here. And
John, are you not going to take questions on this issue?
we may have
That's asking if we're gonna take questions on this issue. I'm not sure. I just saw it in the transcript.
The reparation part of the meeting is completed. We're going to continue with the legislative part. And I'll just say right now, we're probably not going to have time to get through all the bullet points, so we'll do those in the next meeting, whatever. Right.
It's 9:34. So
Oh, we're gonna get through that.
And we'll try to do it.
Okay, so folks, if you're leaving, you know, the door's there. If you're sticking around for the legislative portion, please pay attention, go back to the meeting, and Isabel will go to you now.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for those who are staying for the consideration of the 5 full bills. And I'm told by John that we have 20 minutes. So I'm hoping we can get through all 5 because our next meeting isn't until a month from now. So we want to be able to make a decision on these bills tonight so that, you know, if they're passed, we can get working on them. So the first one was pulled by Dina, the AI bill 3050. So what was your question about that?
So the problem with.
Yeah, you can go to the microphone, because the issue is Zoom, you know, that's out.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Yeah.
So the problem with the AI bill is that the idea of AI watermarks are actually not a solved problem. And so, no matter how much, so part of the reason I was late for the meeting was because, I mean, there's nobody on earth who wants to regulate AI more than me. I literally was late working on a bill about regulating AI. That's why I wasn't here on time tonight. But AI watermarks are not a solved issue. I actually have a statement from the, of course now this is online, so I'm thinking somebody texts me. But Professor Ben Zhao, who's the Neubauer Professor of Computer Science from the University of Chicago. We've been working with him on this specific topic for a really long time, for more than a year. And all AI watermarks, while the idea is great, that it's intended that you want to mark something so that you can tell if it's deepfaked or not, it's not actually, those are very breakable. They can be faked. There's no way to actually do it. And what it does is it actually takes the responsibility that these AI companies have for their products and actually shifts that burden onto the victims. Because there's so many different data sets that are out there. There are great bills that are in this legislative term. Assembly Bill 2013, which is about the inquiry of data. Assembly Bill 2602, which is SAG-AFTRA's bill for deepfakes. These are bills that can actually do something to protect people. This particular bill is a bill that's specifically designed to distract from the actual problem with this sort of promise of AI watermarks, which is not something that's actually technically able to be done anytime in the near future. It's a distraction. It's something the AI companies are pushing, and they're fooling a lot of people with this idea, but it's just not something that's actually technically achievable. So that's why, you know, everybody's been falling for this. It's not just you guys. So yes.
This bill isn't just to bring forth to say watermarks, it's to establish regulations for the watermarks.
Right.
So it's not what they're gonna do isn't settled yet. They're going to be discovering and talking and thinking about what is the best way to regulate watermarks and how to make them more effective and maybe to overcome the objections that you're just talking. It's to create something. It's not done, finished, so forth.
Sure, no, I wholeheartedly understand that. There are a number of bills on AI watermarks, but you can try to regulate something that doesn't exist. It just doesn't exist. It's not possible. It's not technically possible. It's like trying to regulate unicorns. It doesn't exist.
Okay, does anybody else have something on this bill? My thought, because Dina and I have communicated about this outside of this, because I know this is, you know, a big issue that she works on. I think that we're at the very beginning of regulating AI and people don't exactly know how to do it. I mean, last year we endorsed a bill that was by Ted Lieu that was just the legislature intends to study and do something about AI. And like, that was it. There was actually no content to it, but we endorsed that because it was a beginning. So this one, you know, I understand, especially, you know, for what Dina's saying, her perspective, that it is imperfect, it's just the beginning. I'm still, after listening to you, I'm not quite so sure, but I'm still kind of inclined to just go with it because at least it's an attempt. It does also make me curious about the other two bills you mentioned, so I think we'd like to look into those as well.
I have also heard, and I'm not an expert in AI at all, but a lot of people who care passionately about AI say that we're very late in regulating it. And what I understand is that in Europe, they've been far ahead of us in doing this. So, you know,
That's absolutely true, but you have to have a regulation that means something. You can't just regulate something that makes any sense.
Are there other AIs?
Yeah, she mentioned too. Yeah.
There's about 10 of them.
Okay.
This is just not one.
Yes.
Could we wait and see the other bills before we will vote on this and not even do it today?
Well, do you think there is harm in endorsing this one?
I
If we
think-
later look into other ones?
So here's my concern. I mean, I wouldn't be a good advocate for people who actually care about regulating AI if I didn't say something. I don't want to like blow up the meeting. I really don't.
Yeah.
But honestly, I think that, you know, there are a number of really good bills. I think the harm in supporting this bill is you would be coming out of this meeting and you would be saying that it's AI watermarks, let's put together a framework for AI watermarks when they're not something. You're giving a false hope. You're giving people the belief in something that's not technically possible. That's the problem.
Okay, so I see, you know, the differences here. Yes?
What I think is not clear, at least to me, does this more or less suggest or give a measure to regulate AI in reference to how it's utilized, or is this just something that's thrown together as just a protest?
No, it's to regulate how it's used, yeah. Okay, so I would just say, this is my personal opinion, not as the, you know, head of legislation, my personal opinion. As imperfect as it is, I'd probably be still in favor of it, but also open to looking at other AI bills that you might want to support, and we can look at those. We're having a meeting on Monday, we could look at those. Yes,
So my question is, because I'm
but we're still gonna vote, so everyone's
I'm
gonna be
so
able to vote.
confused also.
Yeah.
If you vote for this bill
Mhm.
to regulate, are we saying that we don't believe that the bill will be able to do the regulation? Is that what we're saying?
Well, I think what we're saying, like, this is a new frontier, this AI,
Right.
watermarks, like, it's all, and regulating AI, it's all new, you know, to all of us. So the bill is attempting to regulate like deep fakes and things like that, to have some kind of way of distinguishing the real from the not real by having watermarks that say this was generated
I
by
guess what I'm
AI.
asking is.
But the technology may not be there.
With respect to
Yes.
AI, if we support the bill, that's what
Yes.
I don't.
There's no harm. And
Okay,
there's no proof that a watermark is not effective.
This isn't, and I
There's
guess
no
a watermark,
I'm just trying to get it.
Okay,
okay.
But even if it is.
Anyway,
there's
a
other-
watermark is an attempt to
So I think we
regulate.
should, yeah, I think,
There's other parts to the bill also, which say that deep fakes are gonna be regulated and there's gonna be punishment, so it's not just about watermarks. It's a beginning to regulate AI. It's doing something. It's educating people to learn what to do.
Okay.
Just wanted to note
Talia,
there's,
I'm sorry.
just wanted to note there's a comment in the chat from Darylyn Stapleton. She said, I stand with Dina on AB 3050. Damages are 250, capped at 500, not enough of a deterrent.
Okay. Dan?
I agree with that. Question, it sounds like, are we letting perfect be the enemy of the good?
No.
Well,
Or
that's
are
my
we letting
opinion.
perfect, or is the good just like, it doesn't exist?
It doesn't exist, that's the problem.
That's what I was saying.
Typically, it's not something that's solvable. AI watermarks are not a thing. Like there's been a vast amount of research into this subject matter. And they're all breakable. So what you have is you have some people that can manufacture a fake watermark, and then you have people who can break the real ones. I can't get it out of my stupid phone, big surprise, but Professor Zhao has talked about the fact that AI watermarks, they're all breakable, the ones from Meta, the ones from Google, all of them. It's a false notion of hope. It's a distraction from the fact that they're actually stealing data, which is what's actually making them able to create the deep fakes. That's
So
the
Dina,
problem.
my question is,
Watermarks aside, is the
well, just on this
worth
question though,
supporting?
all I have right now in front of me is this one sentence, but it's to establish standards for watermarks.
Correct.
So that would be something new, the
Establish
standards.
for watermarks, but they don't exist. They're not possible.
Okay.
Thanks.
Does anyone have any new points? We haven't heard. Okay.
Only that if we decide to endorse this, it
Yes.
seems like it would if we then decided something better, then why would you want to leave what the emphasis on the best bill rather than waiting and deciding?
Well, I would
which
say,
one
I
is
don't
best?
think these bills are necessarily competing with each other, so if
Okay.
we're for one, it doesn't mean we're not.
I found this statement.
Yes,
Okay, this is an expert in the field.
yes.
Unfortunately, I have to inform the folks here that AI watermarks are not a solved problem. In fact, there's been much research in the space and all signs point to them being near impossible problem in the context of what we want. More specifically, most legislative bills that mention AI watermarks want two things. Watermarks that cannot be removed once added so that generative AI output like deepfakes cannot be cleaned to look like real images and photographs. And B, watermarks that cannot be forged or added by unauthorized parties so that real photographs of or human art cannot be discredited by adding a forged watermark in a post-processing step. The problem is that neither of these properties is negotiable, yet everything we know from research in AI watermarks today says that the current systems can achieve neither of these properties, especially under attack from bad actors. Those who want to either discredit real imagery or to produce generative AI fakes that masquerade as real imagery can break all of the watermarks today. I have looked at all of the documentation available on the new proposed watermarks from Google, Meta, and others. To the best of my understanding from the documentation that I have been able to find, they all have these limitations. Will it be possible to design future systems that solve the issue convincingly? Perhaps, but it is my opinion that it will take a very long time and the results will always be vulnerable to sufficiently incentivized attackers. Thus, watermarks cannot and should not be used as a crutch or a way for AI companies to avoid their responsibility on these issues.
Okay, I move that we table this bill till the next meeting. That will allow us to bring it back to the committee. But part of that is, I think, I would like to see what the other AI bills are that Dina thinks are better, because maybe if we wanted to bring this back, it could be in concert with all the bills, and then that way we can pass all of them, but I
Okay.
completely hear what you're saying, and I think it's valid.
Okay, that's good, okay. So we have a motion and a second. All
Okay,
right, let's vote.
is there?
You would be looking at this.
The legislative
Legislative.
committee, we're meeting on Monday, actually, so if you can send me the bill, can you come and join the meeting?
Okay, great,
Okay.
great,
So we will, we have reparations bills to talk about on Monday, and we'll make it reparations and AI themed meeting on Monday. Anyone who wants to come to that is welcome to come. Also, anyone's welcome to the legislative.
Okay. Yeah, let's take the quick
Let's
vote
take a
on
vote.
tabling, all in favor. 14 plus 2, okay, so 16, 17, 18, okay.
+4.
Yeah, I'm including that,
How
so.
many more minutes do we have, John?
So, anyone opposed to tabling? Okay, let's move on to the next
Okay,
one.
okay, let's,
Depends on-
Alice is here. Did you pull 2584?
Yeah, I did.
Yes, okay.
Thank you. I'll be quick. This is, I think, a very well-intentioned bill. I think there are a few practical concerns that I have about this. Specifically, there are housing developers that are producing a very large number of deed-restricted affordable single-family homes that would fall within the scope of this restriction. But my specific concern, and why I'm asking you to table this tonight, is that this bill as written would apply to certain land trusts that are set up as investment trusts. I think that this bill can be amended in a way to get around that, but as written, I would ask that we table support of this right.
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion, is there a second? Good.
Well, yeah, okay. Oh, so
So
then we
we
have
have,
discussion.
yeah, now we can
Discussion.
discuss it,
Oh,
but
okay.
once there's a motion, we have to.
My first thought is that I think there's a way that we could endorse this with the idea that in our letter, we would say like the amendments that we'd like to have. So I'd be willing to entertain that if you want to like, write that out and, we can consider that on Monday.
I'll send
If we
you some stuff.
endorse the bill. Can you do it that
Okay,
way?
well, so
Does that make
that's up
sense?
to, there's a motion and a second now, so we have to see if that's friendly to that motion. In other words,
So what's the
so
motion?
the motion was to pull it.
Yeah.
And
for
this,
Ellen
and,
to come back and present to the legislative committee, is that what I'm hearing, on how it can be
well,
approved? or-
No, because
no,
then we
Isabel is
can't,
proposing.
yeah, because then we can't. have it
Isabel, you're
open
basically
up.
making I'm just speaking procedurally, you're
Yeah.
basically suggesting a substitute motion
Yes,
that would be, instead of pulling it,
yes.
that we endorse it, but include what Ellis is talking about in the letter as part of our advocacy.
You might wanna see what I recommend first.
Well, yeah, consider, no, then I would want to approve that I would want to move that we approve it tonight, because we just want to get going, because otherwise it's another month before it comes to club. With the provision that we would invite you to submit either in writing or in person, the suggestions that you have, we would then include, in any advocacy going forward. Would that be friendly to you?
Well, it has to be a substitute motion. 'cause
Substitute motion, but
you're
I'm
not-
asking him.
Yeah, well, Ellis has to agree to it before we
Okay,
can do
okay.
it.
Would you
Yeah,
agree with that?
that's fine, I'd second that.
Yeah, okay, great.
Okay, so let's vote on the substitute motion, but Mike.
I'd like some clarification.
Sarah Ruth,
Ellis
did you have something you wanted to say before the vote?
No,
Okay,
I
thank
was
you.
the seconder of the original, of Natalia's.
Thanks.
They did it, no, Natalia.
Targeted
Okay.
procedure, I
Yeah.
Get the clarity that I'm trying to get,
Okay.
what we're talking.
Yes,
So what I'd like to see, that I would vote for, if this is what we're talking about,
okay,
is a motion that we will support if amended, and the amendment would be to assure that whatever entities are creating true deed restricted affordable housing would be exempted from.
okay, I can agree to that, yes,
If that's
yes.
that motion, I would.
For clarity's sake, is
I
that a
would
motion?
second that substitute motion.
That is the substitute motion that Ellis,
Yes.
that,
I'll second that.
I think Mike has clarified the substitute motion.
so
Okay.
just
Thank you.
now, I think Natalia probably knows this, but she made the original motion that was seconded by Craig.
Yeah.
And the substitute motion was made by Isabel that was seconded by Ellis.
So the substitute motion gets voted on first.
Yep.
If it wins, then the first
that's
motion
it.
just goes away.
Right.
All right.
And could somebody restate for the purpose of the people on Zoom what the motion is?
And
The substitute motion first?
Yeah, Mike had it very
Mike will take
succinctly
care of it.
stated.
So the club's gonna vote to support if amended, the amendment is to exempt whatever forms of organizations are creating true deed restricted affordable housing.
And Michael, that was something that both you and Ellis signed on to?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the objection that Ellis was raising, and I agree that if it inhibits that, it should be exempted, so yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so that's what we're voting on, right?
Okay, great. So
Okay,
let's vote on
let's
that.
vote on that.
All in favor of the substitute
Oh.
motion?
Where that was. The substitute motion.
20 total. 20 total.
Okay,
Okay, all opposed?
okay, then we've got 1999
I
electricity.
think Kevin had a question.
Was it Kevin? Okay, is Kevin, June still on the line there?
I'm here. I hope you can hear me.
Okay,
We-
yeah,
I pulled these not necessarily to oppose them, but to ask a clarifying question. There are 3 big corporate utilities in California who are far too cozy with the CPUC. But we here in Santa Monica are fortunate to get our electrical power from 100% renewable sources via the Clean Power Alliance. And I'm concerned that this bill might affect the Clean Power Alliance as well as the three corporate giants. Can somebody clarify whether you have consulted with the Clean Power Alliance on our possible endorsement of these bills?
I have not consulted with them. I could quickly look at the bill, but I remember seeing the entities that were affected and not seeing that one.
I would like to make a motion then that we defer affirmation on these bills until you have a chance to talk to somebody from the Clean Power Alliance. And I do make that as a motion.
Is there a second? Okay, Dan Hall seconds.
Can we circle back to this bill? Because I just want to look up something.
Yeah, let's go back to it. So
Yeah.
Kevin, did you have another, was it the same thing on the, what was the other one?
It was it? Someone had pulled AB 3145 with family preservation.
Yeah, I did, and there's one for a question.
Oh, okay.
Louis, you wanna come up here?
Yeah.
The city of Santa Monica has a representative on the board of the Clean Power Alliance. I know that for a fact because it used to be me. And I would hate to vote on this without consulting with that person, who I think is Gleam Davis.
Okay, so right now, Isabel's looking up some information, and if we don't have a clear answer, then we'll consult with Clean and bring it back. So moving on to the next one, go ahead, please.
Yeah, 3145, I apologize, this is more of a question, that's what I told, but Proposition 1 talked about how there is a lack of qualified professionals, both social services, behavioral services professionals. And so I was just curious if this bill would somehow delay any issues with either children or those that have to take parenting classes, because they are now, those individuals now have to be culturally competent and provided by quality professionals. So whether or not there is actually the amount of professionals that would qualify to teach these classes, and whether or not that would impact either the children or the parents that have to take those courses. So any delays that would happen in that. So that was just my question about just the number of qualified professionals that might be accessible for that.
If you were going to respond, could just come up so that you can advertise.
Question, right? You really like, there was a child who was killed because he was returned to his parents, and they speeded that along, right? There was Noah Quattro, and there was another kid. And I think what had happened is that, the judge has this box and he checks it off. And then what's behind that is that a kid that the parents went to some sort of class. You can sit in the back of the class and just sit there and, it sounds like the DMV, right? But this is a child in the child's life. And what a psychologist does when they work with the family, they engage with the family and kind of try to figure out, if a person is workable or not. And it's a pretty high level of skill. And I think you're right, there's probably a real big problem with trained professionals not being around. But it seems immoral to say, well, we should speed this up and have unqualified people working with people who could be potentially dangerous.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think Newsom has, Prop 1 doesn't do much to solve the lack of qualified professionals in the state. What would is, some money for people who want to become, go into the profession to train. And I think Newsom had talked about it, but I've never seen it. I've never seen him put any money into it. So I think that we have to protect our kids.
Yeah, no, totally agree. Yeah, I think my question was more so about would that delay anything for children?
The delay is terrible.
Yeah.
But, it's not gonna kill them. And going back to abusive parents, but.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so for me, I think definitely support, but I think that was the overall question I had with not that places. Thank you, appreciate it.
Okay.
Thanks, so then you have.
Oh,
yeah,
no,
thank you.
we should just go ahead and vote on it.
Yeah, so let's vote on that one, and we have a motion to support this bill. Who made the first? Okay, Dina made the motion, seconded by Luis, all in favor? Okay, 15 here, 2 online, 3 online, so let's call it 8, let's call it 19, including Patricia. Yes, 19 of them, Janice, so that makes it 20. Okay. 20 in favor, you can put your hands down, any opposed? I know there's not in the room, every hand went up. Okay, no opposed, okay, so it passes. And now, Isabel's gonna come back to your question, Kevin.
Okay, so Kevin, what I could find is that this bill affects PG&E, SCE, SDG&E, that must be San Diego?
The San Diego Gas and Electric, Pacific Gas and Electric, and Southern California Edison.
Okay, I don't know what CCAs are, maybe you know, you're in that field.
Well, CCAs are community aggregators, and that's exactly what the Clean Power Alliance is. So are you saying that the language exempts CCAs?
No, it applies to CCAs.
I would like to confer with the Clean Power Alliance before I would be able to vote on this.
So this would just set a cap. This we're talking about AB 1999 of a $10 utility tax.
Yes, Isabel, I've read the bill. I just don't understand what the impact on the finances, which are kind of tight, of the Clean Power Alliance might be. And I would hate to see us cripple the ability to get 100% renewable electricity for Santa Monica, which overnight reduced our carbon footprint by 17%. So can we just take a moment to talk to somebody from CPA?
Yeah, I guess we could.
Okay, do you want to table it to the next month?
I hate it because it's a month, and this bill is so important to me.
Could we, approve the condition on?
Yes, that's
Clean
good.
Davis.
Before we send anything.
Yeah.
To the legislature.
Yeah.
consulting with the Clean Power Alliance.
Yeah, I like that.
Let's
If
do that.
there's an objection there,
Yeah.
then we'll.
Okay, yeah, so what Mike has suggested, which is good, is that we vote to approve this conditioned on consulting with someone from Clean Power Alliance, which provides clean power for Santa Monica and other communities. Make sure that they are not adversely affected and don't have an objection to this bill.
And if they say it's okay, I'm fine with that.
Okay, so
I would, however, I would ask and suggest that in the future, if any utility-oriented bills come before us, that we proactively reach out to CPA.
Okay, that's a good idea.
okay.
Okay, so
call the
let's do
question.
that. Let's call that question.
Was there a second though?
Oh, does anyone want a second?
Was that a motion?
Mike made the motion. Okay.
And Barry seconded.
Barry seconded.
Perfect,
Okay.
thank you.
So all in favor of that?
Same number, there's still 14 people in the room. And 5 online. So it's like-
Very good, people. We did it by 10 o'clock.
Is that all?
Yeah. Thank you.
All right, so for those who are still with us, join us next month. April 24th, we'll have Senator Allen. We'll hear about some of some more bills from the legislative committee. Thanks, everybody. Good night and good luck.
Good night and good luck.